Hello out there in YouTube land, all you cool cats and kittens, and all you rainy Sunday readers out there, you crazy comic book collectors. Hope you're doing fine. There's somebody had a birthday this past week. This is an old friend of mine here. This is Superman. All right, 86 years old as of August 18th. August April 18th of 2024. So 86 years ago, a few days ago, plus a few days, 1938, Action Comics #1 came out. This crazy scientist and his wife found out that their planet was blowing up and stuck a baby in a rocket and shot them out into space. Uh, you know, a lot of people have looked into that. And it's the story of Moses retold. Superman's been like a Christ figure, a symbol of hope, a lot of things for a lot of people. Americana, you know what I mean? Yet he's recognizable worldwide up there with like Mickey Mouse and everything like that. And I got a lot of Superman stuff. I knew I had some stuff, but I didn't know how much. So I've got all kinds of things scattered here, and we could sit down and I want to be talking about Superman and showing some things because Comic Cam is working. I can actually show you this stuff as I talk through it and talk about Superman. Yeah, so yeah, he looks pretty good for 86, doesn't he? You know what I mean? Can't even tell he's an alien. Can't even tell. It's fantastic stuff. All right. He's been on stamps. He's been on lunch boxes. He's been on television. He's had many versions of them. He's had tons of books. And, it all, I know, I don't remember not knowing Superman, Justice League, and the books I read as a kid going back to the 70s. And of course, I actually miss these days, which is kind of wild. We'll show the coffee cup today, so I hope everybody's doing well. I'll do my intro properly here in a minute as we sit down and stuff. Coffee's a little cool. It's 42 degrees when I got up this morning. I don't know what it is with these cold mornings. So we are here for you people in the future. It is April 21st, April 24th, 2024, 9:13 in the a.m. And we're just going to spend the morning here looking at Superman stuff, showing my favorite books. And if you called me up tomorrow, I could probably add to this list and stuff. But I'm kind of going by the things that hooked me a little bit and the things I constantly want to go back and read. Superman. Over the years, going all the way back to 1938, I think one of the big reasons Superman has lasted in different reasons for different reasons and things like that is definitely like the marketing and how he's put out there. There's a guy named Jim Steranko. Now I should have pulled it out. I have one of them, but he spent many years interviewing people in comics and people had anything to do with comics and creators and things like that. And he came up with the history of comics and stuff. And one of the people he actually ended up protecting was a guy named Bob Kane. Because nobody had anything nice to say about Bob Kane. So that's a whole other issue. And we're talking about Superman today. But what does that have to do with Superman? Well, Bob Kane was the son of a lawyer, and he was one of the first people, if not the first actually, in comics that understood contracts. And in his contract, when it came to his creation, Batman, which was requested for him to come up with a hero because of how popular Superman was. That in contract, he actually put in that if this thing was marketed outside of comics, he got a piece of it. So when people came snooping around for toys and radio and things like that, a lot of people at DC were sort of like, you don't want this, you want the Superman. So there's a big gap besides the radio play, which I love the radio play. I started listening to the radio play finally properly in the early 2000s, thanks to the internet. But I love the radio play. That's where we got things like Jimmy Olsen, and I think that's actually where we got Kryptonite. It's been years, man. I used to be able to go back and forth on this stuff. And as I'm talking, it'll all probably come back to me, right? But that's why you don't see a lot of things except maybe like a lot of Batman merchandise for a lot of years and stuff, right? They would push towards Batman because Detective Comics, which would become National Periodical, which would become DC proper and things like that, had two young men who had revamped their own version of Superman into a more what we become to know as Superman, with his carnival strongman outfit, which is why he has shorts underneath over his tights and things like that. Goes back to the carnies and stuff. Um, they ended up selling. I had to look it up because over the years the number has changed, but there was an auction in the year, I want to say 2010, where the actual check that was written out to two young Jewish men from Cleveland, Ohio, thank you very much, of all places, had created the Superman. And they were bought for $130. I wished I'd done the math before the show here to tell you what $130 in 1938, how much that's worth now with inflation and stuff, right? And of course, not only did Superman end up starting proper, make it popularize the superhero and going in at the perfect time during the Depression and World War II and everything like that, but it also tagged into creators' rights, where Neil Adams in the 70s was like, hey, these guys need a piece of the money. And that also ties into where I have to say I'm bound to have gotten my start with this, right? For people who don't know that's here, I'm gonna get past the part where I have been reading comics since I was 4 years old in 1977. The stepdad, the uncle had comics, magazines, pulps, everything, everywhere, and I would read them. Huge Avengers League, Silver Age fan, things like that, but more into the Bronze Age. And Superman was in Justice League. I kind of steered towards teen books when I started buying my own comics to get more bang for my buck. But the thing about this is that I was 5 years old when this movie came out, because you were going to be able to believe a man can fly. This is Superman, the movie. And as great as things like Avengers Endgame has been, The Rocketeer, American Splendor, majority of the Marvel movies from 2008 to 2019. As great as those movies are, as much as some of those movies validated kind of the superhero and made them mainstream and a little bit popular, even if it didn't do that for the comics, it did more for the character and stuff. This was it for me. The first, we'll say 45 minutes, the actual origin of Superman, all the way up until he puts on that suit and we see him fly for the first time in his Fortress of Solitude coming at the camera. Because the tagline for this is, you will believe a man can fly, and they did it. The first 45 minutes of this movie are classic. I don't think they've ever topped it. And I'll never be convinced otherwise. Have there been better movies made? Maybe. But the first 45 minutes, for what it did to the genre, what it did for Superman, to make you got to understand, comics were stigmatized so much more than they are now, even though they feel like they're more mainstream, which, of course, that's a whole other conversation. The people saw comic books with the Adam West Batman campiness stuff, right? There were Filmation cartoons. Super Friends were on the air. It's for kids and stuff. And then we had Christopher Reeve. There's a lot of things that drive people nuts about Superman. And one of the things is how he disguises himself. Clark Kent puts on a suit, a hat, and acts very humble and, things like that. And basically acts like a dork is the way to put it, stuff. And he couldn't be the Superman who doesn't wear a mask and everything like that. Christopher Reeves pulled it off with body language and showed how that could be done. There's actual scenes where he's in a room with Lois Lane and he's looking at her, and when she turns her back, he kind of stands up straight and things. There's very subtle things. Christopher Reeve pulled it off and stuff, right? So yeah, this is where it started for me, right? I saw this in the theater, and I actually think it's in the town I'm living in now, Tazewell, Virginia. I think the movie theater is all busted up and stuff, right? But I'm pretty sure that's where I saw it. 5-year-old memory, I remember the movie. And then I had to look it up. Thanks to the glory of the internet, I thought it was like 79, something like that. But it used to be a big deal when a mainstream movie would actually pop up on television. HBO was sort of new, Showtime was sort of new, the cable thing was still kind of new and not accessible everywhere. And then in 1980, I guess I was 7 years old, freshly 7 probably. I didn't have a lot of babysitters growing up. I actually was like a lock and key kid, like many people at the time. And I know the first time I was by myself for a whole day and things like that was when I was 5. And I had one babysitter. Her name was Jerry, and she's actually on my Facebook. She ended up being our neighbor a few years later and stuff like that. And I still see her every now and then. I actually went to Motley Crue concerts with her and stuff in the late 80s and stuff, right? But she was the kind of babysitter that would sleep all day on the couch while I went about my business, and she would sneak boys over and stuff, right? So she decided she was going to sneak a boy over the night that they were going to have Superman on ABC at 8 o'clock. And I don't think you understand how I was calling the shots, and this was how it's going to be. All right. There was no compromise. There was no anything. I don't even know where my parents went, you know. And of course, they were out for it. I was actually helping them out and didn't realize it. So I am in front of the TV, sitting Indian style, right there, that far from the freaking TV, right? And I made the whole room dark. I let them know I don't want a lot of noise. This was not me. This was not typical me, but it was that night. And I saw that first shot of Krypton and stuff, right? And I don't know, cool boy that decided to come over there is all up on her on the couch behind me. And he's talking about, Superman and stuff, how he's like, I grew up on Superman, and he got the planet wrong, right? And I turned around and I went, that's Krypton, please be quiet. And I turned back around and there was this pregnant pause. I heard him like, I grew up on Superman and I'm getting schooled by this kid. And I turned around and I was like, I said something like, I've asked you nicely once, like, you might have to leave. And I turned back around and it was glorious and stuff, right? So yeah, this was the movie that started it all for me and stuff, right? And then there was Superboy comics. I still have a bunch of them, and of course, as Superboy and things were going on, right? And I have some of the comics that were in the house at the time, right? But then there was Superman 2 that came out, and I remember going to the theater to see this. I might have been a drive-in, I don't know, right? Again, this worked in my opinion because there still weren't many superhero movies made this well. If there were, hey, that's a whole thing, right? But there was TV shows. You got to understand. There was like the Incredible Hulk and Wonder Woman going on. This Doctor Strange like pilot of something that kind of popped up. I don't know if I saw it as a rental or actually on TV. I don't know, but there were a lot of things going on. But this had actual villains, right? And a few years later, we would get the Donner cut. So I recommend both of these. They're both on very well. But it turns out, thanks to the Donner cut and the internet, many things were going on to where these two movies were shot back to back. That's why we have the Kryptonian villains and stuff, right? And let me tell you something, Zod, as I've always been a little bit more for the villains, and I and many people, I was a Zod fan. I was a Kryptonian fan. Sarah Douglas, Terrence Stamp. Terrence Stamp became like, anytime he was up there, I hated if he was doing comedy stuff. This was the bad guy because we got the classic tagline, the classic scene that even the Supergirl TV show on CW did when it was, what was it, the Earth X crossover that they did with the CW shows with Supergirl in the league. We had the tapping on the window. General, would you like to step outside? Supergirl even did it. And it was like, you would kneel before Zod, right? The kneel before Zod, man, became part of comic book culture slowly over the years. And sadly, it was with Mallrats that it became the mainstream comic book culture with Jay screaming it in the middle of Mallrats and stuff after hitting a security guard with a bat. Because he had that silly hat on and stuff that kind of killed me, right? And then there's all sorts of ways for you to get into the Superman titles and stuff, or to catch up on Superman history, right? I'm a huge fan of the Donner stuff. I'm a huge fan of everything that's been done. There's very few things Superman that really get my goat, and I wish they weren't done. My actual favorite era of the comics and are the 60s, the Weisinger year. Mort Weisinger. People can correct my pronunciation because this is live. It's Sunday morning and I'm always sleepy. That's part of the charm of this show. I'm a fan of that. He came up with the idea of the Fortress of Solitude, the Phantom Zone, even the silly stuff that came up with. I couldn't find my one of my favorite Superman stories. It's packed away somewhere here. I have one, two, three, maybe 3.5 to 4 long boxes of Superman comics that accumulated over the years and things like that. But one of my favorites in the '60s, there were the Kryptonite years. They came up with ways and silly little things that were going on, but it was charming. I love the idea of Krypton from the '60s and stuff. Jor-El is actually one of my favorite characters in comics ever. But if you want to get into it, there's all sorts of documentaries out here. The one I really like is The Amazing Story of Superman. This came out, oh my God, almost 20 years ago. Is that right? When we had the Brandon Routh Superman movie come out by Bryan Singer. He actually left the X-Men franchise to get a hold of this, and he tried to go the Donner way. I have trading cards of these movies and stuff. All sorts of things. I have a little box here of Superman memorabilia and things like this. I knew the movie was going to flop if they didn't get a villain, and by gosh, they brought back Lex Luthor, and I was like, well, I'm gonna go see it. Few little nice things in there, stuff like that, right? So this documentary came out, and you can get it probably cheap. It's probably on YouTube. A lot of these comic book documentaries are on YouTube. I have a playlist I need to look on YouTube and maybe make it public if it's not already, right? But I love this one, The Amazing History of Superman. It does not get political. A lot of things that have come out through PBS within the last 9 years and stuff. There's a couple documentaries I have around here and stuff that go political and really left leaning, when these documentaries should be objective and apolitical and just talk about what was going on. So there you go, right? They tried to go with Supergirl back in the day with Helen Slater, and she did the best she could with what they gave her. And they really would have saved this movie if Christopher Reeve could have made a cameo, I think, and stuff. But I saw this in the theater, and I took it for what it was. I love how I can watch things, be objective, but my expectations are so low and stuff. I'm like, hey, that's cool and stuff like that, right? Again, the Brandon Routh stuff. And then we have the Man of Steel by Zack Snyder. And now we're coming up with James Gunn relaunching the DCU movies, starting with Superman and pulling from the comics with supposedly All-Star Superman, The Authority, and looks like we're going to get some terrifics in there and bringing up stuff, Creature Commandos and stuff. And I have to say, I have liked everybody that has played Superman, but I'm able to, I grew up with things like James Bond and Doctor Who. The character should always be bigger than the actor. You can have your favorite, Sean Connery, Roger Moore, all did great jobs with the James Bond. But I remember watching Remington Steele as a kid going, that should be James Bond. And for him to finally get there and find out the story of why it took him so long to get there, I was like, I knew it. So that's why I'm fine with actors. I don't like when actors, certain revamps and boots and stuff, they don't get to finish their story. That's why I was so glad Andrew Garfield showed up. I think the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies are crap, but Andrew Garfield deserved better because he did a great job with what he did. You follow what I'm saying? What made those movies craps were not the actor's fault. You see what I'm saying? So to have Andrew Garfield show up in No Way Home and get to finish his story a little bit was with the magic of the movie. There should be some justice, right? So these are too big to put under Comic Cam, but I'm going to show you some things that I had as a kid. This disintegrated. The stepdad got this great Superman and Spider-Man. We had treasury editions that I have a few of the originals, and I have replaced a bunch of them. But these were what I read as a kid. I have Conan, Fantastic Four, things like that. But it was the original material that came out in this gigantic DC and Marvel Treasury edition of Superman and Spider-Man, the crossover. And so help me, I still always pull for the villains. I think villains are just more interesting characters sometimes and stuff, right? It's just, it's wild, right? But this right here, did you see John Buscema? I mean, I knew this guy worked for Marvel, and I knew this guy did this. I would go down the line and read the credits in this, right? And we would see Spider-Man versus Wonder Woman and Superman versus the Hulk come up. And all the stuff in this team up, and this was so much better than the team up, the original one they had back in, what was it, 76? Ross Andrew drew it and stuff, because these characters did not meet until the very end of the story. Well, this one is packed, and you can thank James Shooter for being one of the people, right? So there was these TV movies. It was supposed to be a TV show, but it turned into TV movies that were on television late 70s of Peter Parker's Spider-Man. We had the Superman movies. We think we had two by the time this came out. And everybody was talking about X-Men and the Dark Phoenix and Frank Miller on Daredevil. I would find out years later that wasn't something big in my house at the time. But there were other things going on around here that I'll show, and it was these things, right? So I read this, and this was like side by side with the Marvel Super Special. What was it, #1 or something, of the Kiss magazine that came out a few years later that we bought at a 7-Eleven on our way to a Kiss concert when I was like 4 or something like that. Anyway, that and this, I have bits and pieces in a box somewhere where it actually disintegrated because it was actually read and thrown around the house and kept out at arm's length and stuff, right? Some of the greatest Doctor Doom stuff is in here, man. How he just like put Superman in his place in a few places there, right? Fantastic stuff, right? And then, like I said, I had to acquire this. I would see this in advertisements, and I'm so glad I document all my most 99, 98, 97, 97% of my hauls are documented on YouTube here, right? So we get things like this, which is just fantastic, right? I mean, I have all kinds of stuff over the years that were Superman movie related. The costume designs. And the only thing I really couldn't find that's disappointing me is my Millennium Edition of Action Comics #1, and I have a 70s DC First kind of like treasure editions that came out of Action Comics #1. The one I had as a kid disintegrated, but there was nothing like being a kid and seeing all this stuff going on. And like I said, I would love to see a proper return of the Zod. The Man of Steel Zod, it's all right, but I wish they had thrown in the tagline of there's just something royal. It's something royal, not as savage, something methodical about that Zod. I just kind of liked the quiet work. So yeah, many things out there that I'm just absorbing Superman. And then one more thing that I was so happy to get, and this thing is beat up. It's a piece of crap, but I got an All-Star Squadron books to show you that I read when I was like, I think 9 or something, right? And to me, all of a sudden, it was it. This was over. This was one of the things that I was dying to see because, you know, on Filmation has some live action shows on Saturday morning. And we got the Shazam, and then later on the Shazam at ISIS Hour, right? And learning the history between these two characters, between DC Comics and Fawcett, we have a character that actually outsold Captain Marvel. Wait a minute, outsold Superman, and his name was Captain Marvel. I also will probably show you the parody that came up in the 50s that kind of rejuvenated some of this stuff, right? From Mad Magazine and Wally Wood. But the whole thing is that I am a believer that Captain Marvel could take down Superman simply because of the magic basis of his powers and stuff, right? So yeah, I love this stuff, right? I absolutely love this stuff, and a lot of this stuff was not sophisticated writing, but purely for entertainment in the visuals. You know, you finally get to, right on the cover, you get to see what you wanted to see. And then they play around with matching up characters. We get Mary Marvel and Supergirl kind of face to face there. What happens? Well, you're going to have to find it. And just because this is bagged in here, I'm seeing it and stuff, and I've already shown him twice. Who knew that Spider-Man was going to inch in there, right? But yeah, if you like Wings in the Band on the Run and stuff like that, here's the Astonishing Spider-Man a Treasury edition with a tribute to that cover, if you will, right? Don't worry, guys. Comic Cam is coming. I just want things that will fit, okay? Let's see who is here, because we're just going to take our time today. All right. And I have tons of stuff. I'm not exaggerating. I have stacks this high. Okay. Right here beside me and stuff. Right. I have stacks right in front of me. Right. Some things we'll spend time on. Some things we won't. Don't worry. We're not going to go page by page on this stuff. We're going to move along. But the better books that I like are going to be shown last. I have them in the back cover. So John C. is here. Man, be like John C. John C. is the role model here. John C. is the man. Like, subscribe, hit that bell. videos. Hit that thumbs up, guy. Come on, it's Superman's birthday. I'm not begging for it, but do it for Superman. All right. Because without Superman, we wouldn't have what we have now. Yeah, that's all there is to it. You don't like Superman, that's fine, but recognize the merit. But anyway, like the video, subscribe, hit that bell for. I'm usually here on Sundays, but I could pop up at any time. 86 years old. Yep, absolutely. I've had this thing for years when I was a kid, when I started doing the math, that I can't wait to see Superman. I want to live long enough to see Superman's 100th anniversary. You know, that's a weird goal to set. And I was probably 5 or 6 years old, because there's some comics here. 78. It was 78. Superman was 40 years old when I was a kid. So yeah, there you go. And that was when I was like, wow, I might have a chance to live to see his 100th birthday, because I was young and thought I was going to be immortal. Man of Steel was a good attempt, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked all the stuff on Krypton. See, that's the thing, man. Something about Superman, just the fact that they keep making the movies, that's cool. I don't really, I'm objective about him, right? Oh my God, Superman 4. Peace, whatever it was, the quest for peace. I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed for them. Yeah. The Donner Superman movies and the Max Fleischer Superman cartoons were perfection. Still watch those. I was going to mention those. I have the old DVD sets you used to be able to get for $1 at Walmart, packed up in another room, because you started finding these things streaming and on YouTube and stuff like that. But the Fleischer cartoons, that is Superman. To me, it's you can go back to Action Comics #1, and then you need to do the Fleischer cartoons. The money that they asked for was ridiculous per episode, even for 1940s movie, because they didn't want to do it. So they asked for an outrageous amount of money from the studio that approached them, and they went, okay. And we got glory. And that went on to, of course, really influence the Batman animated series, which is the perfect Batman, Yeah, so I'm so glad we have friends here. Great to see you. I'm sorry, this is John Jones commenting. And this is, I cannot see it. Quinell. So thank you for joining us this morning. What was the one that Alex Ross did that was the same size of the Superman piece, I believe? I don't have those trades by Alex Ross, believe it or not, because I always figured I would get a collection of them at some point. There was a plan. There's a plan. I never followed up on the plan. It was my fault. There's some Alex Ross I'm going to be showing here. Paolo, I have a family thing, but let me just check in for a minute. Great to see you, man. It is Sunday, Paolo, and we have talked just enough to where I know that Sundays can be family time for you many, many times. So I appreciate you just popping in to say hello. Yep, Kingdom Come is good. I will be showing Kingdom Come. Peace on Earth. There we go. John C. is right on it. That's the Alex Ross Treasury Edition. I call them Treasury Editions. I actually have the Superman Fantastic Four Treasury Edition. I didn't pull. I got a ton of these Treasury Editions. How are coming to Heroes Con this year? If so, could we meet up? Proud One Collector. I'm gonna go ahead and get it out there. A buddy and mine, we're both going to go to Heroes Con. We had it planned to get a room for the full weekend. And things like that. But due to several things in real life, we are not going to be able to go. It all sort of fell apart a little bit, probably about three or 4 weeks ago. So I will be going to Myrtle Beach with the family. I have some health issues I'm taking care of. I'm having surgery on the 30th and stuff. And then my buddy has some things going on professionally and stuff that's being taken care of. With things changing and some of the medical stuff going on, it was better just to do the things we know we can do, if that makes any sense. But there is next year, and I would love to meet up with you sometime. Absolutely. Last year was not a good time to meet me. I had a little bit, it was a little bit complicated last year. I was not myself. Friar Tuck, good morning. Great to see you. So, all right, guys, we're going to do this. We are going to go ahead and bring in Comic Cam. StreamYard has made it to where Comic Cam is working today. This is 2 weeks in a row. I can't believe it. And it did start out shaky. So let's bring in Comic Cam so we can actually look at stuff. And with the magic of my finger, Comic Cam is there. So yes, there is my coffee. There's my computer. And I'm not going to pull this down because I need room to turn the page. Okay. So hopefully you're on a bigger screen. If you're on your phone, I do sort of apologize, right? So there's a lot of source material out there, right? Here's a stack, and I still have stuff over here, right? And it is sort of disorganized, right? But there's many things out there. And I just smacked Comic Cam in the head, didn't I? All right. So there's a lot of source material that I can pull from with Superman. This stuff is actually kind of cheap, or it used to be. These things are kind of cheap. Man, that is crooked to me. I see. I did smack Comic Cam, didn't we? Oh, I see the problem. Okay. All right. After sitting there slamming StreamYard for Comic Cam having problems in the past, I turned around and messed it up. That is instant karma, folks. John Lennon was right. So there's many things I've collected over the years. First of all, I was into role-playing games. The only one I actually really played was, of course, I think it was second edition D&D, maybe third. I'm getting old, guys. I've said it many times before. But I would like get Dragon magazines and whatever I could find in my small little town and grab things. And you saw advertisements for this. I had the Marvel TSR was the one that was pretty easy to get at the time when I would run across them, right? Monster manuals and stuff. But you would see these advertised in the comics, and I did not know anybody that was getting them, right? But these are fantastic source material for role-playing games from White Wolf, going way back for you guys. One of the most amazing source books I have is Rage Against the Appalachia, where they gave you the source material for the Appalachian Mountains and it had actual history and stuff, right? So source material comes from places I have the Watchmen source book for it and stuff. But this DC Universe stuff, right? DC Heroes and stuff. Clark's apartment, it goes into detail, even though this is of the era. But what doesn't change is a lot of the stuff they give you, the pre-crisis history. Look at this. Before they explain things to you, they kind of give you stats and histories of supporting characters. And with Super Cat Grant, how to play these people, the psychology, the eras of Superman. Like I said, I could have just kept pulling out Superman stuff, his supporting cast, his villains, his rogues gallery, if you will. The creators that have come on and worked on Superman have all built a part of this, right? And one of the things that with all this rich background that they built, Kryptonian villains from the 60s and the Bronze Age, the Phantom Zone. One of the many things that I've heard over the years, Candor, one of the many things that I've heard over the years that creators have said is that he's so powerful that it's really hard to write him. I think, in my opinion, after reading interviews and collecting comics for so long and getting a smell of how some of the industry works and the marketing, and strangely enough, it was through Batman that I kind of pieced some of this together, because when they killed Robin, Jim Starlin was fired, not because of the people he was working with in editorial and stuff, but because the marketing department was pissed off they killed Robin. Is that I found that as a mainstream character, as a figurehead for the company, you really can't change Superman. You can do the illusion of change. You can change him for a little bit, but by some anniversary issue, he comes back. So I would imagine that you're limited in the stories that you want to tell, because you really cannot mess with Superman too much, is what I would imagine. So thank God for Elseworld stories where it's not canon. And then, of course, if you are a kid of the 90s, a collector of the 90s and mid 2000s and things like that, you had Wizard and Wizard specials. And as I could say, over the years, as Wizard went on, you slowly saw the book diluting and stuff, man. It started out with a bunch of goofballs who had a passion for this hobby and these characters and stuff. And they came out with a publication that covered everything and had very dense articles. And then as they got more and more successful, they split off into 3 books, and then came out with these specials and things. And they worked a little bit more with the comic book companies and stuff, right? So you can find Wizard specials. It is so easy to turn around and get caught up on your Superman. Editor's letters, manuals of steel, Q&As from creators. But what I want to look at, this gives you a guide to Metropolis, you know, even his cities, his mythological cities that don't exist. Smallville, Kansas, on a farm, very humble. When he moves to the big city, becomes a writer of Metropolis. And Metropolis, there's no doubt in my mind they got the inspiration from the movie silent sci-fi movie of Metropolis, which they actually did a one shot of that I had put up there, right? His Fortress of Solitude. Let me see here. There's trivia challenge. What I'm looking for is there is something in here where they go over some of the changes that happened to him over the years. Give you, his insignia, his powers. Superman didn't always fly. He used to just leap over tall buildings. He could jump. And they just sort of go over everything that happened with it, right? So, like I said, there's very few things that I can't stand about that they've done with Superman over the years. And the stupid Superman Red and Blue, the death of Superman by coming up with Doomsday. There's been a few things where I was just rolling my eyes like, oh my God, this is hard. But we have the Fortress of Solitude. I am somebody who loves the 60s era, but I also love what Byrne came in and did. And we'll be talking about Byrne and Mike Mignola as we go through here. Alex Ross coming in when he finally hit DC and doing some fantastic things. Coming to Earth. I mean, his origin is so well known, but sometimes it's so well known it's been told. I always try to slow people down and think about next time you're around a baby, next time you see some lady holding her baby in public, or you have a family member that's had a baby or anything like that, really look at that baby and imagine somebody putting that baby in an experimental rocket and shooting them into space, hoping that they get where they're going. I don't think people realize that's why Jor-El is one of the greatest heroes ever, because it worked out. The fathers and sons and things like that. Like I said, so many great things that went on, the life and death. Should have marked it, but they have like some of the greatest heroes. One of my favorite crossovers is Hullabaloo by Mike Allred, where he mixed the Silver Age Superman and Madman Frank Einstein. When they crossed over through dimensions, they actually kind of merged together and came through, and Madman got some Superman powers, and Superman got a little bit crazy there, a little bit. The Alien crossover, like I said, it's his cast: Lois Lane, Laura Lamars, Lana Lang, Lex Luthor, Perry White, Jimmy Olsen. We know all of them. Yeah, here's the top 10 tales and stuff, right, that Wizard came up with in the 90s here. This Wizard special came out in, like I said, this is real informal. I'm just having fun. 1998, 26 years ago. Wait, 1998. Yeah, 26 years ago, right? So we had Skeeter, right? John Byrne had come in. They came out with a new Action Comics annual. And they had Art Adams come in. And it's some of the most sparse Art Adams art I've ever seen. I don't know if he was rushed or what was going on. But, if you compare it to his X-Men stuff and Marvel stuff, it's overly simplistic a little bit. Not a lot of detail in the backgrounds and stuff, but they took care of it. And there's always been this whole concept that off and on, if you've been a Superman fan, of what would happen if Superman came upon a vampire, because Superman is made of, his powers come from the sun, the solar radiation of our yellow sun and our lighter gravity and stuff, right? So we end up having a Skeeter, a little vampire, and it kind of shows what happened in the story written by John Byrne, what would happen if a vampire bit Superman, And then I have the Super 7. Carl Kessel came up with this 2-part story. There was an annual event in the annuals where they were doing, like, I can't remember if it was like the Dead Earth or something post-apocalyptic. And they did this 2-part story in a Superman annual number 6 and a Superboy annual number 1, the 3rd series, where we got a post-apocalyptic Justice League. And I absolutely love that stuff. So you're from the 80s and love everything like that, you get it. Superman Aliens we'll be talking about. I stuck in there because of Kevin Nolan being involved in it. The actual John Byrne Man of Steel, where he came out with a weekly 6-issue series in 86, I believe, before it came out as a new Superman number 1. And he stuck around for a few years on Superman, leading up to his 50th anniversary. And that came out weekly, and it actually supposedly had pages in it that he came up with in around 1984, when it looked like DC may have Marvel distributing their books, and he wanted a hold of it. We will be talking about Alan Moore with his Jungle Line, his Swamp Thing books and stuff, right? The Superman of Metropolis, the Superman number 10 under John Byrne, where it's that trope of Superman's powers going out of control when he ends up accidentally destroying Metropolis. The Supergirl saga, you will be seeing that in here, the swan song of John Byrne published Superman. Alan Moore, What Happened Tomorrow, Kingdom Come number 1, for the man that has everything. I was there for all of it. And my favorite is and was Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow out of all the Alan Moore stuff that he did. And we'll be talking about that. So, like I said, there's been a lot of things. There's been other things that have come out after this we'll be seeing also, right? And then I recommend this. I got this at Ollie's outlet store. I don't know, man. I probably got this for like $4.99 or something. So what did it retail? It doesn't say. Anyway, I got this at Ollie's for cheap a few years ago. And it's real simple, right? This is if you're a Superman fan, and this is a reference. This is actually a how to use this book. It gives us some art from the comics. There are some pages in here that it's oversimplistic, right? Anything that has to do with Superman, villains, planets, people, anything like that. Anybody that's popped up, they get it's in alphabetical order. So if you want to know anything about trivia with Superman, in the middle of it, we get some fantastic art here. The number 1 issues here. You know, I have this also when John Byrne came out with the Superman number 1. They took the original Superman book and turned it into Adventures of Superman, and it was fantastic. It was a bit more slice of life, down the earth stories like Hell's Kitchen, and just a tad, I don't want to say darker, let's put it that way, you know, but just not as much in the light, if you will. And it was Jerry Ordway and Marv Wolfman. I loved the whole concept of the kryptonite colors and what they did and what they did as a kid. I absolutely loved that. The prism stuff, the bizarros, everything like that. It's kind of, you know, and then this is the most famous panel, right? I'm glad I found this because this is what I was going to show you if I found my reprint of Action Comics number 1. But to me, this is, of all things that I'm showing you, of the thousands and thousands of comics that Superman and men have been in and everything, this is my favorite panel ever of Superman. This is the first time he met Lois Lane. And Alex Ross ended up being, this is one of the first things he painted back in the early 90s of Superman when he was playing around with himself. That's not fair to say one of the first things, but I have a Wizard special of Alex Ross, and they were showing unpublished work of his and stuff, and they had this panel, and Alex Ross had repainted it. And I was like, oh my God, this is when I actually became I went from loving Alex Ross's stuff to becoming an actual fan. And I come to find out it's because we kind of grew up in the same era. But for him to have this panel and notice it and realize how iconic that is for those two to meet. Now, what's funny is I have an ongoing thing to where I still don't understand why Superman is into Lois Lane, because I kind of think she's a bitch. But hey, that's just me, you know. I don't know. I got introduced to Lois Lane in the 70s through Superman family and stuff. So I don't know. Maybe it was the era. But yeah, we have all sorts of things in here, right? It's cast right here. This is my era, my favorite era of Superman, represented in this picture. I can love all that stuff. And then we go up into the 2000s before DC 52 came in, where Krypton returns, if you will, and all the people. So many iconic things in here. Bottle City of Kandor. Batman and his friendship, Kandor. But back here, if you want to know, this is what I'm saying. Look at all the detail that go into with the history, origins of Superman, right? We have Superman here, and then they block it up. The original account, the original Superman, it moved on to Earth 2. So we get the panels that were so simple. The first appearance of Superman, the first story, is just a few pages long. And so much came out of that in mind. So we get all of this. We go into different eras, his agenda and the revisions that they did to them over the years, his powers getting more and more, more powerful as years go by. Talk about his secret identity, the idea of his costume. I mean, it's all out there. There's such a rich history in here, and it's all laid out. How magic affects him, his other vulnerabilities. something called Virus X, which is incurable and is fatal to Kryptonians. And that is from Superman, the first series, 156, 1962. This is why I love this book. The citations are there. The source material is there. And it goes on and on. There's so much here to read about Superman's history. And that's one of the magic things. We'll be talking about that this comes from. His death, him coming back. This is just fantastic. The women in the Chronicles, the women in his life. There's a relationship with Wonder Woman and other women and Lori Mars, the mermaid. His relationship with the superhero community. And then the imaginary story and Elseworlds versions. It starts here. It goes here, here, here. We get pages and pages of these Elseworlds and other versions of Superman, and citations of where to find them. So it's just fantastic stuff. Everything you wanted to know about Superman and didn't know there was so much to him is found in this. So this is just a fantastic book that you take your time with. So that's a lot of the source material for Superman. All right. So, like I said, we have Friar Tuck here. Good morning. We have Justice League cartoon of the 90s along with the Superman cartoons at the same time. Oh, well, I have them all on DVD as well, and you people can stream them on Max if you have Max. And you need to check out Tubi. I think Tubi has a lot of, as we're doing this, they have a lot of the stuff that you find on Max. They have a lot of the DC stuff there also, the movies. They may have some of the cartoons. Prime One Collector, I have to admit, a guilty pleasure. Electric Superman. It was so 90s, and I was in high school. I had the small wizard poster of Blue Superman in my gym locker. I have a few books. I have a few books of that I have picked up and stuff. And I found out that you need to check your 90s Superman book. I can't recall off the top of my head. I have two of them. And I actually turned the light off in this comic book room and found out that it was a glow-in-the-dark cover. So there's a glow-in-the-dark cover of your Electric Superman. I think the reason that I have a huge problem with it is that it messed up Grant Morrison's relaunch of the Justice League. As much as I love the Giffen DeMantis 5 years on the Justice League, it was really time to bring back the Big Seven. And Grant Morrison was going to be the man to do it. And we had Electric Superman. And I've read interviews by him where he had plans and it kind of messed things up with his power set and that horrendous costume. He actually made a big deal of it, acknowledged when Superman returned in the costume. Excuse me, in 98 for his 60th, I think. So, yeah. So yeah, I'm not the type of guy that if you like something, I'm going to judge you. It's just I have my reasons, and I'm not going to have my mind changed. But if you wanted to tell me about why you liked the Electric Superman of the era and what you dug about it, I'm not going to sit there and shit on it. You know what I mean? Like, that's cool, man. That's cool. If it's your conversation, I'm going to listen and be like, that's cool, man. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So anyway, like I said, there's things that I have like little digest. It's killer Superman Kryptonite stories. I absolutely love these. There's so much stuff I don't want to go through there, right? But let me get these out of the way. I'm going to kind of show you how far back we go here, right? This is a combination of books that I've had that came out of the Stepdad's collection and books I picked up over the years here and there, right? But basically the Bronze Age stuff was all over the place. I have Superman family issues that I did not pull out that came from the Stepdad's collection. This is from the Stepdad's collection. He was a Neil Adams nut, and I think he thought this was a Neil Adams book. But Kurt Swan was on the book from the 50s until the 80s. I always kind of wish that he would jump back on to like things like, I wish he expanded. I know the business was different and you worked under the umbrella of an editor, but I kind of wish more people had worked on Superman, the proper book, over the years. Yeah, Kurt Swan, Martin Pascal, so much stuff going on, little things they were doing. Here's some of the people that worked on Superman that made it into this photo that they put a few images over. Yeah, the Phantom Horseman Trouble. I keep meaning to look up who these guys are. I always just kind of assumed that it was Cary Bates, Kurt Swan, and Bob Oskner, but I don't know. I always thought Kurt Swan may have been more Rat Pack looking than that 70s fro look and stuff, right? Lois Lane had her own book. Jimmy Olsen had his own book, and Supergirl went from Adventure Comics into her own book proper in the 80s and stuff by Paul Kupperberg and stuff, right? So it's not just Superman books. There's all kinds of stuff out there, right? But then every now and then somebody will inadvertently or on purpose, who knows what their purpose was, will come up with a story about what Superman means more than actually have Superman, right? And I'm so mad a little bit. Go ahead and tell you. We're going to acknowledge some feelings here, right? But I absolutely love these Jack Kirby Commandy trades, right? There's volume 1 and 2 that I have because I love the paper quality and stuff, right? So I've only had these for a few years. I've read them all the way through them twice. I have all the Jack Kirby Commandies, and I'm probably only missing 5 issues after that. Commandy and Starman, actually, James Robinson's Starman goes back and forth in my head, which is my favorite title of all time. But in this one, this is volume 2, and I'm kind of mad because the great paper newsprint quality of this, which I thought was so cool, it's starting to yellow. And I'm like, oh my God, can I not have some white, anyway. Yeah, I have plenty of white pages and stuff, of yellow page. I have plenty of books where they have yellowed. But anyway, if I can find it now, I thought I had it marked, but we had Commandy where you didn't know if this was the future of the DC universe or not with this big, great disaster, right? So what they did is they were kind of making Kirby pull it into the DC universe proper, and we get the origin retold, the giant-sized Commandy. There's an interview in here with Kirby talking about some of that, right? So I need to back up, but he came up with issue number 29. Which I really thought I had marked in here. There's nothing wrong with looking at some great Kirby stuff, even as fast as I'm going. But if I was going to have you read one issue of Commandy, it would either be Commandy number 29, which is a classic. Sorry, that's so far away. Or I would have you read Commandy number 32 that has a new story, the reprints number 1. And of course, it has a great interview with Jack Kirby. But this book here is fantastic because all it is the Superman costume, right? It's already ruined for us. You know what I mean? Like what the surprise is. But basically, Commandy and Ben Boxer, as they go across this post-apocalyptic world, run across some apes, gorillas that believe in the Mighty One. And they do a retelling of this origin of the Mighty One. And we know it's Superman, but they don't. And they talk about the legend. So the whole thing is that all they have is the costume of Superman. And you go through these trials in a contest to see who is worthy, who can leap the furthest, because he could leap across great buildings like that. They've taken the legend of Superman and made little, who can move the boulder and stuff and things like that, deceive or die. Anyway, this is a great one to read because it goes back about the mythology of Superman and what he actually means to people, and the self-sacrificing nature of Commandy and Ben Boxer and stuff, where he's not greedy and everything like that. His character ends up making him the winner, if you will be. And this is where we find out the costume, but it never says that it's actually the comic book Superman. In this world, it is clearly the great disaster happened in 1972, and this is a couple hundred years later. Or whatever, a couple hundred years. Anyway, it's later on. This could be the George Reeves TV show costume that they're doing, right? So it was everywhere, and I thought Commandy handled that fantastic. So yeah, that is one of my favorite stories there, right? And then you got a lot of Alex Ross. Alex Ross gets what Superman means in comics and everything. So when 9/11 happened way back in the day, and we came out with all these artists and stuff donating everything to raise funds and stuff, he took an old Golden Age book that had a little kid and his dog looking up at this poster, this billboard of superheroes, the DC heroes, and he turned it around and did it with Superman looking up at our real life heroes. And like I said, it's powerful because of what Superman means to people. Then we have some of my favorite little Elseworld story here, I believe, right? I do have the one I bought back in the day, and then one I found in a dollar box. But James DeMantis in the '90s and Eduardo Barreto, get some coffee here, came out with Elseworlds was taken off thanks to Batman and Gotham by Gaslight, and Mike Mignola and stuff like that. When we started getting these Elseworld tales where they could finally do things with these characters because they weren't canon. But what would happen if Superman had? A lot of people play with the idea of the rocket leaving. Well, what would happen if Superman left just a little bit later than he did? He didn't end up in Kansas. He ended up in Gotham City. Ended up being raised by Thomas and Martha Wayne. He still kind of became a version of Batman, or did he? And he became Batman in a way because after things happened in here in this story, he's in the cave and he notices that with his super senses, he thinks he's bat-like because they have the radar and he can, get around in the dark, much like them. So that is one of my favorite stories. This is purely for fun. And yes, it is quite dark and Superman is psychologically damaged. When this came out, I didn't grab all of them. But anyway, I have all of these, right? So Superman and Aliens came out, and I'm in here because of the Kevin Nolan artwork, right? Dan Jurgens, I don't know how to explain it. Dan Jurgens' work just never really grabs me. He's done 3 or 4 things that I thought were fantastic. Do not get me wrong, But anyway, when he came up with this concept, there's a couple things they did that I thought they were kind of like wimping out. But what can you do? You know what I mean? So basically, he's in a part of Superman ends up running across the aliens. And I'm trying to think what made his powers cut in half. He brought back the concept of a blue sun. If Superman is under a blue sun, his powers are at half. Well, anyway, we have a weakened Superman. And they brought in Newt in this. So we have a Superman who is not as powerful taking on the aliens. But like I said, I hung in here for the Kevin Nolan artwork, which is fantastic. And I think Kevin Nolan actually just inked this. Dan Jurgens wrote and drew it. Kevin Nolan came in with his inks and stuff, right? But people have absolutely loved that. This is actually, of all things, I have heard this story remembered and referenced more than anything else, Superman, in my circles, if you follow me. There are people that absolutely love this, so each their own. And then I go obscure a little bit, right? And it's my Kirby love and my Kirby love and my fourth world thing. I'm very very forgiving about some of the new God stuff that comes out that other people did. I either just stay away from it or I take it for what it is, right? But here's the Elseworld stories where Superman lands on Apokolips instead of going to Earth and is raised on Apokolips with Darkseid, Superman the Darkseid. Now it's John Francis Moore, Kerwin Dwyer, and Hilary Barta. I like all these people. I like all the work that they've done. I just hate that they didn't really become superstars. Kerwin Dwyer, if I remember right, this is the person that is actually John Byrne's stepson and everything, right? I think these are wraparound covers, right? But if you know Jack Kirby's Fourth World, these play perfect. These are pretty good when he brings in Orion and Light Ray and a few things that's going on, right? Just trying to see if these covers connect. Yeah, I think we go this way with them. So yeah, these all connect. There we go. 3 connecting covers, not wraparound covers. Right. So we end up with this one. And if you know Highfather and a few things here. So and we're actually back on Earth and stuff, right? I enjoyed this story for what it was. It took me a while to track it down. And it's another one of those things where I was like, how did I miss this? Right. So 2 of the DC Elseworld stories that kind of came out and kind of Marvel crossovers. I love this one, and I love the Silver Surfer, the Galactus versus Darkseid, John Byrne one shot and stuff. Right, I thought those were very fun. Now I found both of these in dollar boxes, and these are in bags that I had laying around that I recycled, so I did not pay $4 and $2 for this. Is cheap, right? But Howard Chaykin came in. And Gil Kane and Kevin Nolan all worked on this book, right, called Distant Fires. And this is post-apocalyptic. And I suspect that Howard Chaykin may have read some Andre Norton for you sci-fi nuts out there, because I felt a little bit of Starman's Son in this one. One of my, if not my favorite book that I found when I was 12, written in the 50s about a post-apocalyptic world. Simply because we have a giant cat that he's riding on, right? But there's been, like I said, I do believe, after maybe I should have read these. Here's the one that I read. You can actually see how I've read this thing to death. Because I did buy, I think, did I buy this new or not? Anyway, I got this out of a dollar box, at least by the 90s or early 2000s. This one I found to replace the copy. But anyway, but I get in here and stuff, and it just kind of shows that how the nuclear war affected their powers or whatever it was that hit. I'm actually going blank on it. But if you're a Howard Chaykin fan, you know what you're in for. And this is some of Gil Kane's best work. And I think the guy was well into his 60s by this time, if not closing in on his 70s. But Distant Fire, good and cheap, okay? That's what goes on, right? And this, like I said, they get better, folks. They get better, right? We're just leading up to things. Now, this is the actual copy I bought. This had to be 1983. Yeah, 1983, right? A throwaway Guardians of the Galaxy meets Superman, DC Comics Presents, number 60, right? Gil Kane cover, no big deal, right? Then you get in here and we have a prologue and Irv Novak is a penciler, Kerry Burkett and stuff, right? And it was just enough to interest me, right? But what really got me about this is that this adds to the mythos of Superman. And actually, this is what I was looking for when they had the Green Lantern movie of, what was it, 14 years ago now? Because it actually ended up being one of my favorite Green Lanterns ever because of what happened in this book. We have Tomar Ray. Now, do you guys know who Tomar Ray is? Well, I don't know if this is the first appearance of Tomar Ray, but it was the first for me. But as Superman is talking to the Guardians, Tomar Ray yells at him, "Superman, could I have a word with you? I'm Tomar Ray, a Green Lantern. Before I retired from active service, becoming an honor guard here on Oa, your Green Lantern of Earth is a close friend of mine, and many of Green Lanterns now controlled by the Weapon Master. I ask to remember that you are not acting under your own will and to be careful and be safe." And Tomar Ray was like, "You have my word." And then we get the thought bubbles that you don't see a lot anymore. "Yes, and I know your word is good. I was the Green Lantern of Krypton space sector when it exploded. I failed to save your planet, yet your existence redeems my failure." Now, when you're 9 going on 10 years old, that was a revelation for me. That blew my mind. I'm like, that's genius. They finally did something that wasn't repetitive or anything, right? So, yeah, it is so easy to impress a little kid, I guess, but that still stands with me. Tomar Ray from there on out was my favorite Green Lantern because of that. Yeah, and we've held on to that issue, and I've replaced it. Okay, what do we got here? We have anything new? Oh, no. Okay. All right. What do we have here? I've talked about these. I have a lot to put up. All right. These aren't in any particular order, so I'll just go down the line, right? So out of everything that John Byrne did with Superman, this is my favorite. Right? This is a miniseries. He came out with 3 miniseries, each one 4 issues long. And the first one was The World of Krypton. Second one was World of Smallville, and then World of Metropolis. I kind of gave up with the first issue or 2, World of Smallville, after that. But this is genius. This is by John Byrne, Mike Mignola, 1987. All right, late 87. All right, I have my original somewhere. Oh, these are okay, cool. I got my original still put up, I do believe. Let me look here. Anyway, I do have the originals that I bought because they have the UPC symbol. When I got this, Mike Mignola was not a superstar, yet I recognized his art and knew who he was, and this was the stuff that brought me around to his style. So basically what we have this beautiful, beautiful artwork by Mike Mignola, where we go through 1,000 years of history of Krypton, right? And it gets into Clone Wars and stuff. It's just amazing, right? So we see this new version of what Superman has done with the history of Krypton, pulling all that stuff in. So basically, these 2 lovers or kids flirting are racing around in their vehicles that fly They're flying cars, if you will, that look like fish, are flying around, and she ends up in a horrible, horrible accident. And she takes them to, it takes them to get medical work, and turns out that they clone. When you're born, you get 3 clones that they keep in storage so that you can have replacement parts. And then we come to find out that there was a scandal because there are people protesting, thinking that these clones have rights and they should be released to live their lives or stop cloning people. And then there's a big scandal where we found out a mother has taken a clone of her son out, and it gets kind of weird there. Okay, very Shakespearean and stuff, right? And just to let you know, I think this is the Simonson. Walt Simonson is doing the covers for this, right? So yeah, like I said, big scandals. Here are the clones, where they keep the clones, and this leads to 1,000 years of war, where we slowly see the Kryptonians becoming this, where they have these skin suits on, and they live by themselves in each one in their castle, and they're very cold and distant, and they make babies through tubes sending genetic material and stuff, right? And we actually get to kind of see a little bit of Jor-El there and stuff going on, right? This is brilliant. This is a fantastic sci-fi story. I consider this more sci-fi than I do superhero. And then if you want to follow up on that, about a year later, from the 50th anniversary of Superman, if you will. So I have it here. Anyway, they came up with Action Comics number, I think it was 600 at the time. The 50th anniversary hits. And when Krypton exploded, it took 50 years for the wave of kryptonite radiation from that explosion to travel to the Earth and just permeate it. And Superman was hit and got kryptonite poisoning, and he tried to go down into a cave. He went down into a cave, and in like that Action Comics, they had a bunch of little stories there towards the end, kind of starting to wrap up what Byrne was doing. And there's a little segment of Mike Mignola drawing Man-Bat, finding Superman in this cave and running out to get help. And you just assume he's going to get Batman, and it turns out being Hawkman. So anyway, as he has kryptonite poisoning, Hawkman in this issue, they have put Superman in their Thangarian ship, and they're going to where the planet actually blew up to kind of try to get ahead or behind the big radiation wave that's getting him, right? And it's drawn by Mike Mignola, and you quickly see that this is sort of a sequel to it. And I love how they knew John Byrne hung out with like Larry Niven and stuff. I think it was his neighbor. So he hung out with some like sci-fi guys, and I always felt like that influenced his writing. So we get the real life physics that when a planet does blow up, it still keeps remnants of it. You can't completely destroy it or turn it into a bunch of asteroids. There's still a gravity there it has to fight. So we end up getting an education in physics, in space physics. And Superman decides to fly out there, and there's like nothing but all this asteroid belt of actual kryptonite that will poison him because of the Black Zero terrorists. We'll just leave it at that. You have to read World Krypton to see why it really blew up. I should have said that. So he jumps out there, and we end up with a fever dream of Superman giving us a recap of World of Krypton. And how would they have survived if they had just believed Jor-El about the planet blowing up? They would have came to Earth and they would have took over. It shows them coming to Earth and taking over and landing. Again, they got away from the superhero stuff and did solid science fiction. And to me, that is the best, right? So there's no Superman. So Jor-El cannot stand how the Kryptonians, what they're doing to Earth. And he rips off his skin suit, which is very important. And he ends up becoming their Superman, if you will, because it's but look at that, advertising the Killing Joke. What a great time to be collecting comics. Look at this, right? So yeah, that's a great story. That is a fantastic story. I think Mike Mignola might have stuck around for one more issue with the Silver Banshee, right? Oh, good grief. Let me see here. Do I have that bag wrong? Yeah, let's flip that around. I have to double check these bags. So that is some good stuff, right? And as I said, we're kind of floating around here, flipping around. But after Byrne had left, we had like Mike Mignola came back, George Perez. They had a lot of people come on there. Kerry Gamble came on, Roger Stern. And what happened is that before John Byrne left, he actually had some things plotted out for Superman that they followed up on. I'll be showing some of that. But I absolutely love this 1989 annual of Action Comics with Superman because it has Jerry Ordway and George Perez and Mike Mignola and Superman ending his exile in space because he had guilt for killing, which I'll show you here in a little bit, right? He ends up on War World, and we get this fantastic version of Gladiator Superman before there was anything, right? And this is dense and thick. A lot of things in here. Roger Stern quotes, Kurt, DC Who's entries. In 1989, all the annuals had, they stick in Who's Who entries if you're into Who's Who and reference material. But this is just fantastic artwork, fantastic stuff. And when you're 16 and full of testosterone and angry, this is the Superman you want to see just for a little bit. You know what I mean? He doesn't go pure savage. He does that elsewhere in some books I'll show, right? We're just moving right along. Now we go back to the Richard Donner stuff. I'm all over the place. This is just as I grab these things, right? Like I said, we're all just having some fun here, right? But we go back to Richard Donner returned to Superman. I don't know if you guys know this, and I feel like if I go back and do some reading and stuff, or maybe I just read into it and projected, but I feel like Richard Donner gave us some stuff that he would have done in the movies. Okay. So for you, those of you not in the know, Jeff Johns, the DC writer, actually interned underneath Richard Donner. And from what I understand, he kept him on his phone. They kept in touch. I don't know how good of friends they were, right? So if Jeff Johns rose to prominence and stuff, and a few things were happening, I want to say we were coming up on the 70th anniversary of Superman. I don't know. But anyway, they come out, and they in the comics proper, some things shifted, and we got an annual here and maybe a special and stuff like that. But we got Jeff Johns, Richard Donner. What year is this? 2006, 7, and 8. So there you go. Yeah. But we come up with The Last Son, where we have Zod, Sarah Douglas, and our villains, our Phantom Zone villains from Superman 2. Which I'll end up yelling their names here in a minute and stuff, right? But Superman finds a Kryptonian boy. And what really is going on here is he's escaped from the Phantom Zone. He's part of a trap. He is the son of some Phantom Zone villains, and we'll just leave it at that. And Superman decides he's going to try to raise him and stuff, right? And this is just if you like the Richard Donner stuff, as the story went on, it started getting to feel more and more like the Richard Donner universe. Sorry about all the glare, but there's high paper quality in this one. And of course, there's some 3D stuff. We get the crystals back that made the Fortress of Solitude. Just playing around with all the Richard Donner stuff that he brought forward. We even get the big fight in Metropolis and the city over the boy. And of course, we get the glasses that the Kryptonians wear are 3D glasses for us to read the 3D section. Luckily, I have tons of 3D glasses from DVDs and past comics and stuff, right? But if you are a Richard Donner fan, this is for you, okay? I love the story, but the people who really didn't grow up with that Christopher Reeve, Richard Donner story and stuff, they've been underwhelmed, from what I understand in my circles. And not just to discontinue that, but I have these issues as well, and I actually was able to get Eric Powell to write this, but Richard Donner, my favorite Superman movies. Jeff Johns fan with his JSA stuff and things that were going on at the time. And there's a little book called Goon that I was crazy nuts over. And and then Bizarro, one of my favorite Superman villains, Bizarro, the whole concept and story of him, right? And these three people came together in the late 2000s, the late 2000s, the decade, what we call, whatever, so they brought them all together, and I could not believe this. I was like, this was cookie cutter made for me. So I have those issues all signed by Eric Powell. He may have signed this trade, and I bought this trade just so I could just pull it out and read the story. But Escape from Bizarro World is one of my favorite stories because of the creative team. You don't need anything else. You just get this. All right. So there's some other things in here. Auto binder. You guys really need to go back and I say Google go to Wikipedia on Otto Binder and look at the thousands and thousands of things he did in comics. Seriously. But we get the Richard Donner story of Bizarro World. We get the Son of Bizarro, Otto Binder, writing that with Wayne Boring. The Mark of Bizarro by E. Nelson Brindle, Kurt Swan, and Dave Hunt. And The Mirror Cracked by John Byrne, Dick Giudiero, right? The first two are classics. The third one, your mileage will vary because of the changes that John Byrne did when he got on Superman. As much as I love John Byrne's Superman, I will be objective and call a few things out. And it was kind of cool what he did with Bizarro, but he could have done that with another character. I think either not touch Bizarro or find a better way to bring him back. And yeah, this is signed by Eric Powell. So I got the trade and all the books signed by them, right? But anyway, this particular story of Bizarro, we get the true monster of Bizarro with this Eric Powell's fresh take on everything Superman. And he does pull, like I said, from the Richard Donner stuff because Richard Donner is helping with this, right? So the Richard Donner comic books are things that I absolutely love. We get a little taste of Frankenstein, the movie, you hear with the flowers and the little girl and him saying pretty. But I'm actually going to end up leaving this out and rereading this today, despite the fact I have things to do and other things to read. So yeah, fantastic stuff. And we even get the Bizarro Justice League in here, which I have the DC Comics Presents and I think some Superman books of. But yeah, to me, Bizarro is just a whole crazy concept that there's a lot of potential there, and I think this meets it. And a lot of people don't realize that Bizarro actually started out as a Superboy villain. So yeah, just some classic stuff in this one. Yeah, good stuff there. So yeah, these two are some of my favorite stuff if you are into the Richard Donner stuff. And the Bizarro story, I think, is just a very underrated classic on its own there. Eric Breen come in. Little Jimmy Fireball has come in. Hey, what do you think of All-Star Superman? I'll talk about it in a minute, sir. Stick around. Stick around. I'll talk about it in just a minute. I've got one more. We got a stack here. I got a little bit of a stack here to my left, so I'll pull out. I'm going through the one on my left now, so we'll be getting to it soon. We have Eric Breen, Jeff Johns, Mark Waid, Richard Donner pretty much ruined Superman for me as the comics go. I'm going to jump in here, and I'm going to agree with Mark Waid. I was not going to talk about Superman Birthright and his attitude and his crazy ass. It's very weird for me to talk about Mark Waid in any negative light because I had the picture. I met him, had a talk with him. It just the way he was with me when I was talking and the way he acts everywhere else was it's just bizarre, you know. Jeff Johns, I don't know, man. I would definitely be up for a talk to that to get you to see what you. Well, maybe if I finish reading your comment. Okay, let me start all over. Jeff Johns, Mark Waid, Richard Donner pretty much ruined Superman for me as comics go. Returning him to the Silver Age was regressive to me. Okay, I get that. It's going backwards. I totally get it. And no way would Lois have married their version of Clark. See, and I got to think about Lois anyway. You know what I mean? Like, you got Lana Lang, Lois Lane, Lord of the Mars. Oh my God. To me, that's it. I mean, I'm sure I don't know. There's probably some. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, Lois Lane, I have never gotten what he sees in her. I have never seen it. I just don't get it, even physically. You know what I mean? So whatever it is, I don't know. You know what? It could be something where he's so powerful. I mean, if I was really going to get psychological about it, he's so powerful and has to be so in control, walking around in a world. I think this is from the Justice League cartoon where he finally let go on Darkseid. He said walking around is like, when he walks around, he has to be careful all the time because it's like he's in a world made of cardboard. It's so fragile. And I kind of think maybe he's into a bitch because he can let go of control. You know what I mean? Like, you know, he can kind of let go and just have her attitude take him away for a little bit. I don't know. I'm getting very close to submissive and dom stuff. So, you know, we don't want to go there, you know. Okay. So yeah, the whole Donner, I kind of get it. I get it. It's one of those things I'll process, Breen, you know. when people bring up comic book history and eras and stuff, man, the wheels start turning. I'm so easy to play. We have the great Gore Vidal, who I need to do a show with again. And Gore, I've been going through your emails. I actually found one from January I missed. My apologies. I cleaned out my email. I've made you a priority. So I shouldn't miss any more and stuff. So thank you for the emails. Thoroughly enjoyed the Terry Moore bookshelf tour, if that makes any sense. I see what he saw in Margot Kidder. Love it. Love it. Oh, that's so funny. Margot Kidder does have a sexy voice. I'll give it to her, man. That raspy voice works with some women. Yeah. Yeah. What we got here? The original version of Lois by Siegel. Yikes. Oh, that seems a flapper. I like the idea of her feeling like she had that bob cut and stuff of a flapper and stuff, right? I'm real harsh on Lois. I can't help it. You know what I mean? But, good morning, Gore. To finish my point, if they were going to commit to Clark being the front, okay, let me try this again, guys. Get my coffee. Remember, we're here all together. There's no real big rush this morning. Good morning, Gore. And then he goes to me. To finish my point, if they were going to commit to Clark being the front for Superman, they should have reconnected the marriage to Clark and made her married to Superman. Oh, man. Yeah. Braden, we're going to have to do a show together. These are the things we need to talk about back and forth. No worries, Tim. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I knew it wasn't a big thing, Gore. I was just letting you know I went through some emails and I enjoy going back and looking at a few things, that you send me. Enjoy them immensely. So, yeah, the Alan Moore thing also, man. I have some comments later on. Okay, guys. So as we continue here, right now, if I was going to, this is probably one of the top 3 books that I would show somebody to go back and read them, right? I don't care that it was the 80s. I think I had these bagged backwards. The boards are backwards. No, I got these right. Okay. These were bagged about 30 years ago, if not a little bit longer, right? So these, I really need to go back and rebag some of these, right? And these were not bagged. I never got comic bags until about 1991 or 1990. Okay. But anyway, but it's the swan song for John Byrne on Superman, right? I could do, if I've still had the inclination in the time and wanted to spend the money to really get some editing material going on and do some videos where I just go ahead and I pan across the pages slowly of each page of this story, this 3-page story, and I talk about it very slowly and talk about the memories and how it was fantastic and how they won me over with some things, right? But I think Byrne went out right. He went out right. And people don't realize, I've tried to count up how many books John Byrne did of Superman, right? He did a couple specials. He wrote some annuals. He ended up jumping on Adventure of Comics. He did 22 issues of Superman. He did oh my God, what was it? 15, 16, 17 or something issues of Action Comics. Where he kind of made it a team up and stuff of books. He did Legend, which had Superman in it, right? He did covers. He did a Doom Patrol Secret Origins story that he drew and stuff. It's meant with Paul Cooperberg. But if you go from 86 to about 88 and everything that he was doing at DC, and at the same time, you knew he was going to be coming back. At least he had people wondering. I knew he had people wondering if he's going back to Marvel, because all of a sudden he did Star Brand number 11 with Tom Palmer doing inks while he was still over here. This was it. I mean, he did it. The burnout, the fact that he did not get burnt out by comics blows my mind. I know he was burnt out on Superman, but he was a workhorse for about 2.5 years. Seriously and stuff, right? And I thought for everything that he put out there and all the one shots and all the Superman stuff and all the extra stuff that he was doing for them, he did some Batman, guys. He wrote some Batman stories and did the covers and things like that and angles and everything. So anyway, we got part 1 of the Supergirl saga, and this had to win me over. I was like, oh no. So I liked, one of the things I liked that he did, as much as I love the the Mort years. I can't believe this. The Mort years. Hey, it's not a Howler Mouse video if one of three things don't happen: a technical issue, a phone call, or I can't pronounce a name all of a sudden. And with old Mort there, the editor of Mort there from the 60s, I can't get by saying I learned that name from reading because, yes, I did learn his name from reading, but I've said the name many, many times since the 80s and 90s with several people. But anyway, I like the idea of how, like, John Byrne took steps to make Superman a bit more unique and not so diluted with, seems like, a whole so many people survived Krypton. Give me a break. You know what I mean? So they were bringing back Supergirl, but there's a twist, and it actually ties in to the origin, the Silver Age origin of Lex Luthor. You know, a lot of people, if you go back to it, and I did start to learn this from Challenge of the Super Friends, and then in the comics, it expanded and stuff. But Lex Luthor and Clark Kent went to Smallville High together, and Lex Luthor was so brilliant that he actually did an experiment where he created a life form. But there was a fire that started, and Superboy came by and used his super breath to put out the fire. But he actually killed the life form, and the fumes and things like that made Lex Luthor lose his hair. And what they did is over the years, you thought Lex Luthor turned evil. He was like Superboy. He's so jealous of me and my scientific accomplishments. He can't stand not being number one. And he made me lose my hair, that you completely forget that there's a life form that was killed. So I always felt like John Byrne, when he brought back Supergirl with The Matrix, you have to read the book. This is the life form that he pulled out of that little story. We'll just leave it at that, right? So yes, a Supergirl pops out, and then all of a sudden things get dark. Because what happened is when John Byrne, instead of here's how I would have let me back up here. I'm going to tell you, I try not to do critiques where I talk about what I would do. You follow me? Because that's not a critique, but I actually think what I would have done is better than what they did. John Byrne came on. He went all the way back to the 30s, depowered Superman, and got rid of a lot of the history. There was no Superboy. Superman, if you go back to the origin, he was never Superboy. Okay, Superboy is derivative of him, and it was kind of merged in there and stuff, right? So, it was the era of bringing in kid sidekicks and stuff. So we got a Superboy, or whatever their reasoning was. One of the first retcons and continuity glitches when things didn't really matter like that, So how did the Legion of Superheroes form? It was well established in the 50s that Superboy inspired the Legion of Superheroes 1,000 years in the future, where he even came back and met him, and he became a member, and he was going back and forth in the time stream and stuff, right? So their idea of how to fix this is that they were saying that the time trapper stole a millisecond of time of the universe and made a pocket universe that he manipulated with its and changed things to where that's where there's a Superboy in this time pocket. And then the time trapper, for reasons, abandoned it. And this is where Superman has ended up, is that we're following up a year later on what happened to that pocket universe and the Legion and all the people that were there and stuff, right? That's your Silver Age. That's everything that happened from 55 to 85. That's what this pocket universe is. Here's what I would have done. Not that anybody's asking or interested in stuff, and maybe it's kind of lame, but to me, it's not as lame as that, right? Like I said, I love what was done here, but I can be objective on this stuff, right? But here's what I would have done. A lot of people don't realize that when it comes to our legends in our modern mythology of Robin Hood and King Arthur and things like that, storytelling actually evolved over centuries. And, you can shoot me later because I learned this in a literature class back in like the early 90s and stuff, right? And it was at a community college. Let me not make it sound all glamorous. You know what I mean? Like I was so very studious and stuff. You know what I'm saying? But I enjoyed this little literature class, and it was more the history of literature, if that makes any sense. And there were eras. And then there was the romanticized era where they took a bunch of these stories of King Arthur and Robin Hood and things. And this is where you got the romanticized versions where they have love interest. This is where Maid Marian came from. You know what I mean? So that's over. These stories evolved over, close to 1,000 years on some of them, right? And I'm shooting from the hip, man. I might be expanding or exaggerating the time that these stories have been around. So what I would have done is I would have had it to where over 1,000 years, the story of Superman grew and got exaggerated, and time got messed up, and we had a few great disasters like, the Commandy era and things like that, and the OMAC era. I would have tied it all in that over 1,000 years, the story became romanticized. And the future version of how the Legion of Superheroes sees superheroes matches the Silver Age because of the eras of storytelling. And the stories of superheroes were actually like the Dark Knight Returns, a little bit dark, a little bit more real world. But in 1,000 years in the future, they're glamorizing them. You know what I mean? Like, this is the Round Table. You know what I mean? It's the romanticized version of the superheroes that they've grown up on, and they thought they were real. And that's why everybody had the last name of Lass and Lad, and everybody was all chipper and bright and clean like it's the 1950s. Then they go back to really meet Superboy, and they meet Superman, and they get a taste of the real world where some of that history has been lost and morphed around and changed and stuff and glamorized and romanticized because of all the great disasters and just how things happen. Now, if you don't think that's a good reason, you've bound to have played that game at some point of telephone. We did it like in elementary school, where you put 10 people in a circle, or how many, and the teacher tells the first kid a secret, a one-sentence secret, and you're supposed to whisper it to each person. And by the time it comes to the last person, it's completely changed. That's what I would have done. Instead of like stealing a piece of time and then saying it's a pocket time universe over here that's collapsing and falling apart. So anyway, Superman ends up back over there. And I love what they did with this, even with that concept being ridiculous in my eyes. We get Jerry Ordway coming in here. John Byrne and Ordway are like plotting the second part and stuff, and we get to see this darker version. And what's amazing is that they call back to the Lex Luthor armor, because at this time Lex Luthor was an 80s evil capitalist businessman, and he's actually leading. They're trying to save the universe, but the Time Trapper did. They give you they catch you up very well. Wasn't great when comic books could have been somebody's first comics, so they give you a recap. And they everything I told you is right here, what the Time Trapper did and stuff, because he's a bad guy holding the world and stuff, right? So as this universe is collapsing, and we get the whole history of everything I just told you, and look at that, guys. Here's a Captain Atom cameo in his Charlton 70s suit. Isn't that amazing? Anyway, but everybody's wearing the version of Lex Luthor's armor when it was all green in 83, and it was the superpowers. It was the superpowers figure outfit. But Lex Luthor, because the life form he created ends up becoming Supergirl. The Kryptonians, what's destroying the world is Zod, and the Kryptonians of the Silver Age have escaped the Phantom Zone, and they're just running roughshod, destroying the world. And Lex Luthor is the guy that's leading the resistance to try to take them out. And he came up with that version of it, and he recruits Superman. And it's well established that Superman, the kryptonite of that planet, of that time pocket, doesn't affect him. So he tries to come up with what to do with these Kryptonians of the Silver Age, and he decides to kill them. And this leads to many things. Byrne left it there and left some ideas and some plot that Roger Stern and a few other people kind of went with and stuff, right? I actually have this issue signed by John Byrne with a certificate. He signed it right in the box and stuff, right? So that is a great story. Oh, man. Here we go. Here we go. This is why I love this. This is community. This is what a real comic book community does for people. All right. Weisinger. Thank you. Weisinger. I'm going to have to repeat that 10 times and drink more coffee. Little Jimmy Fireball. Now, I'm taking a break here before I show you the first one, because whenever it comes to any kind of stories that involve time travel, multiverse, alternate timelines and stuff, it gets confusing. And people's eyes will cross out of nowhere, like an Austin Powers movie. That whole Crisis and post-Crisis ruined the Legion for me. It became so convoluted later. As a Crisis fan, I really had to let it go. And as you can see, I have had almost 40 years of letting it go. Okay. And there was some horrible stuff that happened to the Legion. And there was some stuff I had to just kind of go along with and look for what was real. Just eventually, I just kind of abandoned it. And I'm going to be showing some more Legion stuff coming up. Like I said, we're here for a long haul, man. And I want to be moving briskly as I can without trying to get into these and stuff. This is why I'm taking a break. I spent way too long on that. Good God. Those burn issues do look nice though. Yeah, I love the burn stuff, right? When they did a 75th anniversary, DC Comics, if you go to their YouTube channel, DC has this mini cartoon they did for Superman's 75th anniversary. And they turned around and they start out animating back in 1938, pulling from the comics. And then we get to the Byrne era and they skip completely over and it goes directly to like the death of Superman. They skipped the whole John Byrne era that he did for them. He made the cover of Time for Superman's 50th anniversary, right? Whatever happened, I hate when you ignore people's merits. You know what I mean? Unless they've done something close to murder or worse, no. So here we go. Talk about we can go to Breen's comment here, the Weisinger era and stuff like that. Here is one of my favorite comics. It is stamped because people seem to like this. October 20th. Krypton Lives Again. The Legend of the Winged One. Superman's Return to Krypton. Last Days of Krypton. Mike Urey. For you guys who know who that is, editor of Kamiko. Shout out to Curtis if he's watching. He'll know the Kamiko conversation we had yesterday. Mike Urey and Tumar's publishing the stuff. Mike Urey comes out with these one shots, these fantastic books, and I've always wanted this because I met Mike Urey, had a really nice talk with him at a little comic convention in Dublin, Virginia and stuff. And I wished I'd bought it because I thought I'd just be able to jump on eBay or jump on Tumar Publishing's website and order this. But he did this fantastic World of Krypton book based on the 60s and 70s stuff that I wished I'd gotten. But yeah, anything like this giant size Superman, anything to do with the Silver Age. I love the animals, the jeweled forest, the thought beast, anything and everything. As a kid, I just, I'm also a sucker for like Flash Gordon, you know what I mean? So that I watch War of the Worlds. I still watch Forbidden Planet. The 50 stuff used to grab me much more than it did, this idea of 50s sci-fi. I listened to X-1, the radio show. All right. As I've gotten older, I pulled away from it because, my favorite sci-fi is Blade Runner. You know what I'm saying? So, but I'm always going to have a warm place in my heart for this 50s and 60s influenced sci-fi stuff. It probably comes from reading Isaac Asimov and things like that. Right. Now, here is a very special Superman book, right? I've talked about this before, but I've never really gotten around to do it. And I'm going to do this real quick. So I want you to look at this, 1983. I'm 10 years old. One of these is the original. This has to be no, wait a minute. I've got the original is not here. Excuse me. Okay. So I'll have to get in my box. It's not a big deal. But anyway, this is a Superman annual, 1983. There were Superman specials getting ready to come out by Gil Kane and all kinds of cool stuff going on. Marv Wolfman, Gil Kane on Action Comics, which I'll show you and stuff around this era. I think this is Alex Toth. Anyway, there's two stories in here, right? Villain, Who's Got a Villain? And I play with Superman, and that is Kurt Swan being flown around by Superman, right? Yeah, here we go. Alex Toth. And another shout out. This is amazing. I hope Curtis is watching, my buddy Curtis. We were talking about the pronunciation of Alex Toth versus Alex Toth for reasons. But anyway, great Alex Toth. Right there. That is enough to get this just because of Alex Toth's art. Alex Toth's death still bothers me, even though we're coming up around 20 years, closer to 20 years than anything, because from what I understand from his family, they announced he actually passed away at the drawing board. That just really got me. But anyway, we have a story here. To me, this is one of the best Superman stories, in my opinion, ever. And it's probably because it is meta. And to me, this is some of the best Kurt Swan artwork I've seen in a while. It's like he plays with angles and zooms in a little bit more on faces. There's just something more about this artwork that is different than what Kurt Swan has done. Maybe it's where it's a more personal story. But your artist and storyteller is Kurt Swan. Kurt Swan, who had been drawing Superman through the 50s. You know, it used to be your big guys were Wayne Boring and Kurt Swan. And then around the 70s, I believe it was, we got a little Ross Andru and Jose Garcia Lopez, you know, stuff like that. So basically, he's drawing this. He's drawing a Superman issue again. He's in a studio and he falls asleep. And as he is drawing Superman for all these years, this guy would probably win the Superman trivia contest. And Superman used to live on 344 Clinton, okay, in Metropolis, right? He wakes up, he's on a park bench. He soon starts figuring out by hearing people talk and finding out Superman is real, is that he has slipped his way into the world of Superman. And he starts playing around with the idea of multiverses and stuff. So he must be from, you know, Earth Prime. But he knows how to find Superman because he's drawn the book for years now. He's on his 50, 60, 70, starting on his 4th decade. So he knows how to get around Metropolis. He knows the people because he's, you know, wrote them, and he goes straight to Clark Kent's house, talks all about him, and knows, hey, man, I'm probably from Earth Prime. What I love about this is how he keeps his head and how he comes up with a plan, and it's all plausible. You know, there have been things where authors and artists have placed themselves into a book. You know, Kurt Vonnegut did it, was it Breakfast of Champions, and they meet their characters. Agatha Christie, I don't know if she did it in the book or if the television show did it, but Hercule Poirot met Agatha Christie. You know, it's been done before is what I'm trying to get at. But there's just something about this where he's just having a blast, and Kurt Swan draws himself being flown around by Superman. This was fantastic. And I don't know if you have to be a Superman fan to appreciate it or if it's actually a good story. I have no problem being wrong because I absolutely love this. And he's like, but what's great, I'm going to go ahead and ruin the ending. He wakes up, you know, Superman's flying him around. He wakes up, it's 9/18. Apparently he finished the story and didn't remember drawing it. And just when he's sitting there like that's a heck of a dream, he actually wakes up with something, well, bullets, that he picked up as souvenirs from his travels with Superman in the real world. He brought them back. So was it a dream? So Superman Annual number 9, one of my favorites that I don't know if you'll find that on a list or not in Wizards, old Wizards and stuff, right? Okay, so I've spent way too much time on some of these books. We'll move on. But there's a great story where Superman disappeared. Marv Wolfman, Gil Kane, as I can see. And in April 1984, we didn't know the crisis was coming. There were books they were taking chances on and doing different stuff with because they knew there was a reboot coming, even though we didn't. That's why you had the Flash murdering Professor Zoom and having this year-long tale of him being on a trial and going to Gorilla City and getting plastic surgery and stuff. And then there was things they were doing with Superman, bringing in the Forgotten Heroes and playing around with concepts and alien invasions. And we ended up having a story where Superman didn't exist. I think the Superman Revenge Squad did something with time, and somebody is going to have to create Superman. And it just so happens to be these 2 kids from Cleveland, you know. So one of my favorites. And then we have the ultimate for me, right? We're going to get to the popular stuff. We're going to get to the low-hanging fruit with Alan Moore and things like that. But I probably have 3 more of these. This is one of those books, thank goodness, it's usually in dollar boxes and stuff, right? And I only get them if they are in decent shape. This is one of the ones. But somewhere along the line, like I said, I think I have 2 or 3 more of these hanging around. I don't even know which one is my original anymore, right? But, you know, what year is this? 1983, Superman 3. Good grief. I know this book back and forth. You figure I would know the year, right? Let me take a breather here and check some comments. Yeah, going back to what I was talking about, the 75th, the video, you can look it up. DC's 75th, you know, little cartoon they did going through the history of Superman. Unfair to Skip Byrne. He reinvigorated the title. He may be a grouch, but so what? I don't know the story behind it, but it's one of the few times I'm sort of like fanboying, like, oh, come on. Love post-crisis. Ran for about 15 and then seemed to drop off. Got you. That is Shirley Tim. Oh, my God. Hey, good to see you. Wow. Okay. Lord Tate's Comics. What's up, Tate Man? Lord Tate Man. Hello. And then we have Knights of Old. I like the Alan Moore annual. Well, I want to show you something here a little bit towards the end. If it's in the, well, no, nah, it's toward the top of the stack. We'll be all right. Okay, guys, thanks for hanging in there. Since we're going to take just a second here to say like the video. If you're just popping in, sub it, go ahead and share it. Let me know. Are actually staying on topic pretty good today and stuff, right? So this one, this is a book. It's got to be 83, man. Okay, so we're going to pop one open. Now, the great thing about being a kid is I've said many times, up until about the Thundar Barbarian cartoon. So we're talking about 1980-ish, okay? But before that, Kirby was in the house, right? The stepdad, maybe the uncle. The uncle was more into war comics, I think, and stuff, right? So I'm pretty sure it was the stepdad who was in the Kirby, and Doctor Doom was the be-all, end-all of comics and stuff, right? Which I'm sure influenced me, but they were actually writing Doctor Doom back in the day to where, he used to be a badass, guys. That's all there is to it. But anyway, coming around to Kirby comics scared me the crap out of me, the way he would draw and distort things and blocky. And then you had that OMAC #1 cover where you had a lady, to me, as a little kid, looked like she was trapped in concrete. That freaked me out. I'm getting rolling now, guys. Right there, guys. Okay. Right there. Look at that. What the? Sorry. Right there, guys. Right. This is the stuff that scared the crap out of me. Then there's a losers issue in our World at War, or old war stories, or I can't remember, but Kirby came on the our Army at War, I think is what it was. But as a little kid, I called it the Losers Comics because it had the actual title real tiny on top of the comic, and at a big block it said the Losers, And there's a page there where the coloring is horrible, but he's drawn demons, and the guy that's dreaming the demons or seeing them, he's got blue skin because of it's in a dream, or I don't never figured out why. So I would have to flip those comics over if I wanted to go to sleep at night. Then the Thundar the Barbarian cartoon came out. And there's a village of midgets, and I think he's fighting Gemini. That might have been the villain. I don't know. I've got a bootleg set in the actual set official. You figure I'd go back and take notes when I watch those. But anyway, I figured out it was Kirby. And I spent the next 2 or 3 weeks sitting there trying to watch the credits on my crappy little TV that I actually missed back in the day, trying to. You got to remember, guys, it wasn't crystal clear back then. You know what I mean? Even if you had cable, the TVs back then, the pixels were huge. You had little lines. The closer you got, the worse the image was. So I'm sitting there trying to read, find Jack Kirby's name, and there it was. And then I had this thing about the Kirby characters that all clicked. So then this George Perez dude, who I had just read a Teen Titans Doom Patrol story in Teen Titans, and traded some comics with Mike Kessner to get some Justice League George Perez Ron books, draws this realistic version of OMAC. What do I keep doing that? I forget about Comic Can. So I had this thing about seeing Kirby characters drawn in this style, something more realistic and proportionally correct and things, right? Which is one of the reasons why Across the End of Earth did it for me. Oh yeah, seeing Commandy on the cover of #2 drawn by George Perez. And I'm going to have to say it. I think this was, I'd already read the Avengers in the 140s, where we had the Squadron Supreme pop up and a few things. And that's probably some of the first George Perez art I saw in the house. And then we have this. This is probably where I became an ultimate, 1983. This is where I became a true tried George Perez fan, is with this. And what's great about this is that this book actually has the plot. And I've said this many times on this channel over the 14 years. This has the plot of the Terminator movie a year before it came out. This machine comes back in time right here, and it is going to take out the ancestor of Buddy Blank, so there's no OMAC in the future, right? And believe it or not, for years I saw this cover and I never put together this is an homage to Flash 123 until the late 90s. And I'm sure it was because of a Wizard magazine or something.
because at the time, I'd never really seen the cover of Flash 123. Okay. It came over years. So to me, this came first, you know. So this is just a beautiful issue. It's one of my favorite George Perez drawn issues. I don't think he inked it. Yeah, Pablo Marcus. This is the Teen Titans team, guys. Lynn Wein wrote it. And it's just clean. It's a complete story, beginning, middle, and an end, with an ironic tale because he doesn't understand who the thing was trying to kill. He thought he was wrong. They're trying to save the wrong person. And you have to really look in the back panels and put together to figure out who the Terminator here was trying to kill. But you'll get it. It's got a wink and a nod. It is just a fun comic. This to me is, you know, this would be like if you had an ongoing story and you know, we'll say like a Dark Phoenix kind of story where it's all immaculate and stuff. This would be a fantastic breather issue just to remember that sometimes comics are just fun to read. So yeah, this is one of the Superman OMAC stories that I try to read over and over. And then around that era, 1984, and this blows my mind. This is 1984 because so help me, this feels older, you know, in my opinion. These are my reader copies that I picked out of like a 50-cent bin or something, right? I have my original copies that are probably beat up all to shit, signed by Roy Thomas. And he signed them around the year 2000 at Heroes Con, right? And I put them up with a couple other things. The Freedom Fighters, the All-Star Squadron. My first issue of All-Star Squadron was, I think, around issue 8 or something. It's got the Praying Mantis on the cover, you know. I've got the box over here, the complete set of All-Star Squadron. So here we go again with, are they out of order? No. So here we go again where people are fascinated with the Superman versus Captain Marvel idea of comics and stuff. But what is great about this is that they are, I think they've ended up on Earth S or something. God, it's been so long since I read these. But these are the books that, I mean, I read these and reread these because of what they do. We have Superman proper in here. You didn't really see the Justice Society a whole lot in All-Star Squadron. Okay. And they're seeing these clips of the Spear of Destiny, I believe, is what old Adolf has there, where he's taking control of the Marvel family, if you will. And they're watching newsreels and they're like, we got to do something about this guy, right? But we go through here. Where's it at? I mean, is that not a shocking image? You know. So anyway, we have a lot of this stuff in here. What was that? But what gets even weirder all of a sudden is I just lost it. Anyway, there's Billy. Here we go. There's Captain Marvel, Shazam. But when we go into a secret room, there's Billy Batson bound and gagged with a metal, not just gagged, but gagged with a metal plate. You know, go figure. So that's the big mystery. But then we get to see the Golden Age Superman. And when it comes to Superman, my favorite version is that Earth 2 Golden Age Superman. For some reason, it's got to go back to Crosslands and Infinite Earths, you know, what made the distinction. But we just get to see, like, you know, just a pure version of yeah, and then we get that stuff, right? But we get a pure version of Superman, in my opinion, from Earth 2. It always just seemed like more down to earth from that era, if that makes any sense. And also, a lot of people don't know, but Roy Thomas probably has one of the greatest Golden Age collections of comics ever, if he still has them, even his age. Because in the 50s and 60s, he used to drive around and go to like bookstores and neighborhoods and stuff like that and collect the Golden Age books when they were not worth anything and people wanted to throw them out. Oh man, but I'm trying to find the image. I'm probably in the wrong comic. It's probably before this, but there is a few panels drawn where they're on the edge of the battlefield and you got the heroes and a few soldiers in the background, and Superman's sitting there looking at the battlefield, and they're trying to whisper about him, like something's got under his skin, and they talk about him. He's like, I don't know why you're whispering. He can hear you. Right. So it's probably the issue before this. But anyway, Roy Thomas, you know, to me, you know, you got your money's worth every month with a Roy Thomas comic because he has so much dialogue and so much going on in these books that, yeah, it takes you a while to read them. So that's one of my favorite ones. And here we go, guys. This is what some people were asking for. It's backwards. I'm going to have to fix some of these bags. The boards are in them backwards. Good thing I'm pulling some of these out now. I might have to go through that All-Star Squadron collection to make sure all the bags are correct. So here we go. All-Star Superman. Now, being a Grant Morrison guy, I know what I'm in for with a lot of his books. All right. So that's one of the reasons I'm a Grant Morrison guy. There is going to be a little bit of unpredictability in there. But Grant Morrison came up with this All-Star Superman. It was a separate line of comics that didn't really last long. You had the Frank Miller All-Star Batman and Robin, All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison. And what we did is that Grant Morrison went back. He does his homework. He reads and reads and reads, and he read the stuff and stuff, but he went all the way back to what makes Superman Superman. And we got the return of Clark Kent being the fumbling, bumbling idiot and stuff, and rolling and tripping around and stuff. And then we got Superman. But the thing about it is that Superman, his own source of his powers is killing him. Here's the Neil Adams variant. The source of his powers is killing him. He actually gets a few new powers and stuff in over 12 issues that we know he's going to die. So he explores everything that makes him Superman in story. We get a big lecture and a talk where he visits Lex Luthor with some irony. Lois Lane gets her powers, harking back to the Silver Age, a few things. We get this fantastic, his take on the Bizarro world and dealing with the gods like Solomon and Hercules and stuff, having a crush on Lois Lane. We get all this great stuff that made it. And it really went back to my favorite era that I keep talking about, the 60s, right? So there's your All-Star Superman. That's the one I would definitely recommend people reading because even though it's Grant Morrison, he really did not get too convoluted in its own history. He didn't get in the way of himself, right? It's just a straightforward take on Superman with the idea of the tension being that he's going to die at the end. And is he losing his mind a little bit? There's a few things he did in there to make it interesting. Here we go. Oh, it's getting stuck. Bear with me. Okay. All right, we're going to start where I ended here. I like that Alan Moore annual. Like I said, it's coming up. To a certain degree. John Byrne remains the best thing that happened to Superman since Siegel and Schuster. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. As much as I can go over everything and like a whole lot of eras of Superman and stuff like that, it's like Fantastic Four, Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, John Byrne. Yeah, absolutely. Stuff is fantastic. The Blu-ray set for Thundar is pretty awesome. Cool, very cool. Yes, you're still alive. Nice to see. Knights of Old, my first and favorite Superman was the second Treasure Edition with Spider-Man, Hulk, and Doom versus Supes. I don't know if you just popped in here, Knights of Old, but that's one of the first things I showed in this video. Oh, put that to the side. I have so much to put up. Yeah, here you go. Yeah, I talked about that a little bit. Didn't open it up. That deserves a whole video on its own here, right? So let me see. Anything else? Yeah. Well, we have Gore. Oh, here we go. It just uploaded quite a few of the comments. Billy Batson panel made me think of Moore's Kid Miracle Man, who refused to say Komodo because it would unleash the dragon. Absolutely. That is the magic of Alan. I don't have to tell you, this is the magic of Alan Moore. There's so many subtle things. The more you know about where Alan Moore is pulling from, the richer the story gets. Which was another thing I've spoken about when Marvel said they were going to be releasing Miracle Man again back in 2014 monthly and finishing up the story and stuff. It'd been so hyped over the years, and you really had to know some of the source. You just had to be knowledgeable of some comics. And by that time, I didn't feel like a lot of people were really knowledgeable where it came from and the story behind all that. Grant Morrison is a nut, but he is our nut. Plan to revisit the Invisibles later this year. Well, I need to finish the Invisibles. Where is it at? I have 99% of the comics of all 3 volumes or whatever. And somewhere up here, I think it's over there, I have them all in trades. So I got about halfway through the trades and kind of dipped out. It was getting a little much, but I do need to finish it. So good luck with that. Maybe we can touch on it at some point if I get caught up again. I need to check out the Invisibles. Yes, you do. At least the first volume, and then anything that Phil Jimenez uh, drew. To me, that's the golden spot. But you've got to have that world building to have an idea what's going on. There's some great stuff in there, and then it just kind of reaches this point where you're just sort of like, "Come on, Grant. I know you're taking a breather." Invisible is the whole idea that Grant Morrison brags and or claims, and who knows what he did and what he didn't do. But there's no doubt about it that it was involved. Was bragging about the drug use and the LSD use he said he used to take while he was writing it. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I am not a Grant Morrison fan, but I like his All-Star Superman. Absolutely. Like I said, he's more of a versatile writer than what people really know. And this showed it. His All-Star Superman is probably his most mainstream stuff since Justice League, in my opinion. He wrote a Superman story. It was not a great. There it is. That's what it is. It's that Grant Morrison wasn't the star. He made Superman the star, and was able to touch on a lot of purities of Superman. Hey, I love Disney and comics. Late to the party. Well, come on in and definitely catch the rerun. Hey, Steve, long time no see. Okay, these two are talking. I've been reading a lot more of the comics this year. Love your videos because I hear about stories I want to read. Absolutely, man. That's fantastic. All little gems here, and I admit not all are diamonds, but at least it's interesting. So I absolutely loved when this came out. This right here, jumping in here, man. This is Superman in Action Comics 775, right? And this, you talk about at the time this came out back in 2001, there was a lot of stuff going on, right? We know what happened in 2001 around 9/11. We had Frank Miller popping up with the Batman Dark Knight Returns, the sequel there. You know what I'm saying? I could look behind my shelf and see it and stuff, right? And there's some controversial stuff in that, but not for the reasons that Frank Miller thought. You know what I mean? So, like, you had to be there, right? And but anyway, but then this guy named Joe Kelly came out. Mank. I'm thinking this is the guy that drew this is the guy that created the mask. I think. I don't know. I'll have to go back and look and stuff, right? And we're still in the issue era of the Shield numbers, where you would read 4 to 5 Superman books a month, and this is how you kept the continuity in. Ironically, this is number 13. Go figure. But this is called "What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way." This is basically Superman versus the elite. So what was going on is that a book called "The Authority" by one Warren Ellis had just exploded and taken off. And there was Apollo and Midnighter in it and stuff. And comics were going a certain way. It was proactive. Comics were getting a little bit darker again. A lot of things were going in comic books. And Superman, there's always been this thing where it seems like there's kind of a group that's like, Superman's too powerful. He's too big of a Boy Scout. He's outdated. He's all this and stuff, right? And if you don't like Superman, you don't like Superman. But I'm always like about the merit. If it wasn't for Action Comics #1, you got to understand there were pulps going on, radio shows going on. The Crimson Avenger, who was the Shadow, was going on. You had Zorro. You had your Buck Rogers sci-fi Sunday morning stuff. All the stuff was there. Your Philip Wiley, the Guardian book, Gladiator, that I feel like every Superman fan should read. Or look at the comic book adaptation that happened in the 2000s through Wildstorm with Russ Heath doing the art. All the stuff that influenced Superman and all the things that Superman ended up influencing. So yeah, no matter what book you want, there you are. If somebody has super strength, Superman did it first and things, right? John Byrne's Next Men, the guy that worked on it. If you look at his Next Men, I'm not going to go over here and grab the promotional poster, but the trick with the Next Men, except for Jazz, who was acrobatic, he took each power of Superman and gave it to one human being, and you saw what it did to them. You know what I mean? Like, so there's been a lot there. And like I said, I think the biggest weakness was Superman, but it's also something I think that's kept him alive is the fact that there's not been like a lot of real changes to him. Even if they experiment, it always goes back to this. So with Superman being Americana and patriarch and the symbol of hope is what he is and stuff, right? It could be a Christ figure for you. And like I was talking about, all the religious inclinations in there, the story of Moses getting pushed down the river in a boat and stuff like that, right? But the immigrant, a lot of people like to say this is an immigrant story and stuff, right? Whatever connects with people. Comics had changed where the authority was big and the authority were proactive and they fought dirty. They cheated. They did all this stuff. Heroes weren't acting very heroic. That's what I'm trying to get to, right? Is getting to where heroes were still getting to like not very heroic and stuff, but it was popular. And Joe Kelly reminded us what's so funny about truth, justice, and the American way. So I'm not saying the story is by no way isn't meta, but it is one of the best Superman stories because it's all about what Superman is and how he would fight them, So the elite is in here, I believe, and I think it's what they call themselves. And they go to another planet, another moon, if you will, or something, and they fight. And just when you think Superman has had his ass handed to him, they kind of show there's still a lot of potential with the way that Superman takes down these characters one at a time, if you will, right? And still shows you can still be a good guy. If you are into superhero comics, we can give heroes, feet of clay. We can we can have them not act heroic all the time, but their base core is they still have to be the hero. At the end of the day, these are morality stories. It is still good versus evil, saving innocence, protecting, and things like that. And these morals and ideas were being messed around with by like Mark Miller and Warren Ellis and things like that, jaded politically and jaded in life a little bit and stuff, right? It's all mixed for all good. It's just an era, good storyteller, and we pulled out of it. And then Superman would be the perfect character to remind you that it's not all dark out there, That's his purpose, That's why he's one of the most recognizable things. He's a symbol of hope. And that's kind of heavy for some people. A lot of people can't stand that idea of the Boy Scout or something like that. Just goody two shoes or whatever. But I'm gonna go ahead and talk about Superman Birthright because we're on the last stack. We're finally getting to the good stuff. So since everybody's talking about this, we'll do some Alan Moore talk in a minute if you'll bear with me. But in this closet back here, on the inside way in the back, I've got this old beat up short box. It might be a magazine box. And over the years, when I get those freebies they put in your bags when you go to the comic book shop, I have things like that. I have things from Wizard magazine. Like I have a diploma showing that I graduated from Xavier School for gifted students, things like that. And then hopefully it's still in there, but I used to print off pages from a message board I used called comicbooks.com, and it's probably still up there. And they had different boards. Okay, they had a New God board. Walt Simonson would pop in there. You actually had celebrities pop in there. The wildest thing, and this is like 2001, 2002, 2003 that I was on there, and there was people there. And as a matter of fact, I probably found it in Wizard Magazine. Wizard Magazine actually had an article where you could go on the internet, even if you still had dial-up back then, that people were talking comics and stuff, right? And each board had a moderator. So I was frequently used to be, I got away from it, but I was New Gods. I was silver, gold, silver, and bronze age board. I was there. That's where I created a commandy, introduced command to a lot of Marvel zombies. And there was people like Kev who they collected almost every issue of the Fantastic Four since they were a kid. When they came out, and they still had them, things like that. I introduced them to a lot of concepts of the Bronze Age with DC because, of course, they were Marvel guys and stuff, right? But then there's the Superman board, and there was a guy on there who would post the Superman radio station, the moderator did, and I pop in here, and Superman Birthright had come out by Mark Waid, and this was the first thing that Mark Waid had written that I despised and absolutely hated. I thought even the designs in the book were ridiculous, and my problem is that he still tried he did it. He actually kind of tried to make Superman a little bit cooler than he should have been, and it was bullying. He was using this heat vision on people who were carrying guns and hitting them and all this stuff. So I printed off the page when they took my quote talking about birthright and they made it part of their banner for a while. He would always, this is what the moderator would do. The best Superman quote would be up there until the next one came along. And I talked about Superman being, Superman is not a bully. He shows you how to stand up to bullies. You know, Superman's not always been perfect. We'll get past it. It was in context with getting past birthright. I didn't mention birthright in the quote. And I talked about Superman, is able to survive anything that's done wrong with him because he is Superman. He's not always perfect, but it's Superman. And that kind of took off. So I printed that page because, it's the internet, it's new. And I'm like, oh, wow, I said something people liked. It was very cool. And that's what Superman is all about. Now, this is leading up, that story kind of leads up here to Alan Moore. So let's talk about Alan Moore at the time this came out, okay? Alan Moore comes to America, and this is 85, I believe. A lot of his stuff came out in 85 that he did with Superman, because this is the guy that's bringing horror back to Swamp Thing. He's starting to get a buzz. He's winning an Eagle Award here and there. You're seeing it on the inside of comics and stuff, right? A lot of people forget Alan Moore. It took Alan Moore a while before he grew organically. He just kind of grew, and word of mouth, and the people that knew his books knew his books. People who had access to the direct market were way ahead of the game and stuff, right? That was going on. So all of a sudden, the horror guy, the guy that's just doing these amazing, sophisticated stories that's freaking people out and stuff over in Swamp Thing, gets a hold of Superman. And this is pre-Watchmen, okay? And he writes several issues of Superman that become classics. Now, I have multiple issues of his DC Comics Presents 87, The Jungle Fever. I bought off the stands, the Superman annual we're going to talk about. I bought off the stands, and I still have it, the 2-part last story of Superman, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, because Crisis was coming. And out of all the heroes that deserved an ending to their mythology, it was Superman, because Crisis was coming, and then we were going to have a reboot by John Byrne. It was all planned. Marv Wolfman was behind a lot of it with the planning. So this reprints, this hardback. I gave away my soft cover to a friend at work because they never read it. But this reprints Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow from Superman 423, Action 583. Highly recommend those 2 books. The Jungle Line, not Jungle Fever, the Jungle Line from DC Comics Presents 85. Superman is sick in it. In the first page, at the bottom of the first page, he's got this fever while he's driving. That's where I got Jungle Fever from. Sorry if that was a derogatory term. I hate when I have a slip like that, but that's where it came from. From DC Comics Presents 85, and For the Man Who Has Everything from Superman Annual 11. Okay, so those few stories that Alan Moore did all became classics, which is why I am of the mind of just tell the truth about what is so hard about writing Superman. Don't say it's because he's so powerful. Alan Moore did it, and all 3 of his stories became classics. So these 3 books here that are contained in this, I've never opened this. I'm kind of wondering if we should open it together now. Should we open it together? Yeah, let's open it together. Let me see if I can find something here, because I just don't want to rip into it. You are seeing something, man. I am ready to just rip into this. You got to be kidding me. We'll have a little action going there. All right, stay right here, guys. So besides comics, if you can see me, I am a man of action also. I do home repairs. Not very well, but I always have tools out, always trying to fix something. Why? Because I grew up dirt poor with nothing. And if I wanted something fixed, if I wanted to get my security deposit back, I had to fix it. We learned on the job. Back in the day, I would have my Kirby knife. All right, this beautiful edition. I can't remember where I got this. I wonder if I got this from, I don't know. I can't remember. It's so good that I do hauls. So I probably ordered this anyway because it was hardback, because these are classic stories. So we're going to open this, take off this beautiful dust cover. We will not dip the dust cover in the cup of coffee. So we have this and this. So if you're an Alan Moore, I would just get all these. If you're an Alan Moore fan, I would just get all these in one shot, right? But whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow is a highly influential Superman story. They even had Neil Gaiman come in, and he did a completely different take of it. But whatever happened to the Caped Crusader, which I think is fantastic. But yeah, here we go. Table of contents. This came out in 2020. Paul Cooperberg comes in. Paul Cooperberg, it seems like he's the kiss of death on a lot of books he writes, and people told me that's not fair to say. So 1986 is when this happened. Excuse me, right? So I am 13 years old, right? This is the Superman I've been reading as we've led up to all this stuff. And I come in here, and we have Kurt Swan being inked by George Perez in this issue. And we got this guy, Alan Moore, who's got a little bit of a buzz, right? And he comes in here, and they even go back to a Silver Age annual cover here that I saw in Legion of Superheroes 301 for the first time years before this. Going on to it, this used to be a Superman trope to have a cover with these panels on it like this, right? And everything is here. You had Dark Knight Returns going to be coming out a little bit later or during this probably, or something like that. I'm shooting from the hip here. I'm going by memories of what was in the newsstand, what was on the newsstand, and the ads I saw, right? So my dates may not be accurate, but that's how it was collecting comics back in the day. Okay. You know, what's trying to figure out what's going on. Has this come out yet? Never knowing when I'm going to go to the newsstand. The pattern has been, this should be there the second Wednesday. And every now and then the dates they used to put in the comics telling you when a book will be out. In my experience, it really wasn't up to them when the book came out. It's when the guys put them out there. But we get all these things in here that he didn't change anything. That's what I was getting. Like Dark Knight Returns was great because Frank Miller didn't really retcon or do anything. It was tone and stuff, right? And Alan Moore has kept the tone of what Superman was, but it's what's going on in the book, what we are seeing and showing, and having Superman even acknowledge why are all the criminals that I used to have, all the criminals I used to have that were more or less jokes becoming the dangerous ones. What's going to happen when they're dangerous? So right from the beginning, there's this tone of like, this is the end and all these things are happening. And then he takes all his loved ones because all his villains are coming after him. And everything that Superman was worried about happens. He loses his secret identity while he's on air on TV. All his villains are coming after the innocent ones. Superman more or less kept a secret identity to protect his loved ones and stuff, right? So we get to see Lois Lane and Lana Lang having an interaction. We're seeing these incredible inks by George Perez, who was just on fire at this time with everything he was doing and stuff. The Legion of Superheroes come back and let him see Supergirl one more time because she just died in the Crisis on Infinite Earths. And they even try to give him a hint by presenting him a statue of him holding the Phantom Zone projector. And then it happens. Superman is crying, at the end. He knows what's coming, right? And then we get the story. It keeps going. All the people, there's a flat out war at the Fortress of Solitude, and everybody that has loved Superman joins the war to help him. Just fantastic stuff. These stories can be read over and over. And this is the last one I read right here. Actually, it took me a little while to find this because this just disappeared from the newsstand where I didn't even know it came out. So as you can see, as I've shown you before and talked, I've been collecting DC Comics presents since about 82 or 83. There was issues the stepdad had with issues like 6, 8, 14, Superboy versus Superman, and Superboy has a kryptonite bazooka on his shoulder on the cover. But this one right here, this is probably the most underrated of the Superman stories that Alan Moore did, the Jungle Line. So basically what happened is Superman has caught a bacterial infection, a virus, I guess it's a plant-based bacterial infection. because as Clark Kent, he's at this symposium where they've got this asteroid, and it just so happens that there's a piece of kryptonite plant life on there that has that he goes back to his fortress of solitude and finds out that this is like a jungle rot thing that goes on there. There's no cure for it. It's going to drive him crazy. So he's driving instead of flying. And things happen to where we have Swamp Thing come in, written by Alan Moore. That ends up saving the day as only Alan Moore can. So it's just fantastic stuff. So we have Swamp Thing versus a insane, dying Superman. So this is just great stuff. And then we go to what could be the greatest Alan Moore Superman story ever, in my opinion, right? It is the Superman Annual. This is the one that everybody knows. This is the one that Alan Moore gave the thumbs up to be adapted in the Justice League cartoon in the Bruce Timm universe. This is the one that Jeff Johns brought up in his Green Lantern run early in there with the Black Mercy. This is for the man who has everything, where Superman, we get to see politics going on. Basically, for his birthday, as they show up the Fortress of Solitude of Wonder Woman. See, I know the story so well, it's kind of hard for me to tell. I feel like everybody knows this. But anyway, on Superman's birthday, Bruce Wayne, Jason Todd, this is Jason Todd's greatest moment. People forget this. Jason Todd, Robin, and Wonder Woman all show up, his actual friends in the community, if you will. Show up to celebrate his birthday, and they're all trying to figure out what to give somebody who has everything. And when they walk in, Superman has this plant on him, and he's non-responsive. It's a Black Mercy, an alien plant sent by Mongol that it attaches to you. And while it's attached to you, you fantasize your perfect life and live an entire life while you die. So they get it off of him, but we see about Superman's life where he's a family man on Krypton, and Jor-El was wrong about Krypton blowing up, and now he's a joke. And Superman has a little boy, and we get to see the politics. But as Superman is fighting the Black Mercy, his fantasy world goes all to hell. It gets worse and worse and worse, and he has to, he finally reaches a point that he has to admit that his son is not real. And he pulls in Krypton. He pulls in, like, a lot of people don't know it, but on Krypton, there is an island where all the people of color live. And he throws in a little politics in there with a wink and a nod to the Silver Age, because Alan Moore was a huge Silver Age fan, especially of Superman. He demanded that he write the last Superman story and stuff, right? And funnily enough, Robin ends up becoming the real hero of this story. I don't want to ruin too much for you, right? So if I was going to hand somebody 3 stories, of Superman, of course, it's going to be the Alan Moore. The problem with Alan Moore is that he is so popular and he wrote such fantastic stories. He is low-hanging fruit, in my opinion, when there are other great stories if you do a little digging. But that's the problem with comics. There's so much out there. You really have to weed through a lot of crap to get to the good stuff. Now, this is my favorite story. There is a video years back that I have never watched that I did. I don't know if I did the review justice of this book, but this is my favorite Superman story, and it is probably around 20 years old. And I do believe last year they came out with a hardback edition because Kurt Busiek put it on his Facebook page. I follow Kurt Busiek because of Astro City more than anything, but, we're kind of floating away from that. So let me look at this before I show my favorite Superman story. Absolutely favorite. Come on, StreamYard, work with me, work with me. Here we go, Little Jimmy Fireball. Going back to the Action Comics 775 I just showed, what if Superman met the Authority, basically? Yes, it was revolutionary. And even though Superman ends up winning, they do some damage to him. I mean, it wasn't an anti-authority story per se. It was more about talking about that's not the way, I've talked about it enough. Yeah. Oh, Marvel Epic Padawan. Great to see you here, sir. Alan Moore didn't have to follow any rules for his stories. They gave him an advantage over the monthly writers. Not a complaint. They were phenomenal stories. Yeah, Breen, absolutely. Absolutely complete. Oh, wait. Let me see here. Making sure Comic Cam isn't dying here. Let me plug him up. Oh. All right. Not too shabby. All right. And yeah, he had an advantage and they were phenomenal stories, right? And they're standalone stories also, except for the two-parter, if you'll notice that, right? So yeah, Alan Moore, whatever reason that they gave him that advantage, that's we got the stories. And I agree with you, Breen. Absolutely. I'm not putting down the monthly writers at all. If anything, that would be hard because, like I said, I am convinced that there were things that they weren't supposed to change Superman. So I can just imagine wanting to write these stories, but in the end, you couldn't have anything really progress. You know what I mean? It had to be status quo. I get it. That's also what I think the magic of Burns' era is. You know, he was able to respectfully, if I do believe, do some changes there. Led up to things, have some plots that really paid off in the end. What do you think of the new DC Finest and Compact Comics? I don't. I'm out. When I get my Gmart online order and stuff, you're going to kind of see the things that I'm reading. Every now and then I will stick my toe into the current mainstream books and stuff. And, the last thing I actually read was some Mark Waid, World's Finest, where we return to Kingdom Come a little bit, and after the first issue that I got, and I'm locked in. I'm locked in. I've already pre-ordered that entire storyline, but and they'll probably be coming in my next order. But my books accumulate over a few months before I get them. I don't get them monthly. Every time I dip my toe in there, I think something's ridiculous, or I'm just not happy with it. And even though I will complain a lot and try to be objective about things, I try not to just bitch about comics. I like to keep it balanced, or it's going to take something that really pisses me off before I dedicate a video to it. I've got several videos over the years where I'm just blasting some stuff, but that's why there's so few, So I don't like wasting my money. I got more time. I don't have time for what I consider mediocrity. I don't have time for what I think is just going to be repetitive or dumb, or it's not going to matter in a year. I've never seen so many retcons over the past few years and stuff. This Krakoan era of X-Men that I kind of dabbled in once or twice over the years and stuff, it's going to be forgotten if it's not already forgotten. You know what I mean? If there could be great stuff out there, DC's Finest and Compact Comics, this stuff could be great. Could be some gems in there and stuff, but it's going to have to rise to the top. The cream is going to have to rise to the top before I dabble in there. And usually I get recommendations from people that know me or I respect their taste. There's a wonderful, painful Legion of Superhero issue where Brainiac, I know we were going, annually remembers the death of Kara. Yet when he sees her in real life, he can't reveal to her how and when she will die. Yes. 2, 3 short box and the long box of Legion of Superhero stories. But yes. Oh, man. I got to find that. I'm going to have to look that up. This is what happens. I tend on going back to stuff I've read before, despite all the new stuff I have to read. I recently reread more Swamp Thing in the Big Absolute books. Blew me away again, just like it did in the 80s. It holds up. And and I've said this before, and I think I've said it several times over the last year since I started these rainy day Sunday shows. It's the fact that we don't get to see technology a whole lot. If you go back and you read Swamp Thing, we're out in a swamp, we're out there in nature, trees are timeless, maybe a hotel room here and there, maybe he's walking through an old town with a well-established history like New Orleans, and then we shoot him off into space, and Gotham City is Gotham City. It's all about the settings and stuff. One of the only things that really kind of dates the book is the Crisis crossover, and that's if you're being picky, you know what I mean? And then we had the classic art that was in that stuff. That stuff was so ahead of its time that it could not, in my opinion, be colored the way it needed to be colored until these absolute editions come in. And I think they went overboard with a few of them. I really do. And I have been yelled at online when I gave objective examples of why things like the Swamp Thing and the Dave Gibbons recoloring of Killing Joke, I come in there being objective, saying this works and this is what the color did and how it helped tell a story psychologically, and people just want to yell at you. You know what I mean? Like they're just sort of like, how dare you? This is a classic. Stop living in the past, things like that. Give me a break. That's why it's nice to do these shows and have everybody just be, cool about things, But yeah, that stuff is just fantastic. More like good wine ages well. Yes, read that, Lord Tate Man. Yes, so glad you're here, Tate. Appreciate it. Absolute. About to read Planetary in Absolute Format for the first time by Ellis. Okay, if you get bored, right? If you get bored, I probably have reviews in a playlist. Put Howler Mouse Planetary reviews, where I do deep dives, deep PBS like specials, like public radio. I'm not saying they're dull, but I go deep dives on how every issue is about the history of comics, what it's about. Warren Ellis got those books. Anyway, consider it like a DVD commentary for each issue. I quit because the 30 to 45 people that were constantly nicely and appreciatively asking me to finish the whole series. Bless their hearts, those 30 to 43, I think 43 people all watched the video because I had, views for them. People just weren't interested, which is fine. But it was something I liked doing. So yeah, I've got some reviews on theirs if you end up liking Planetary, and I do deep dives on them. I haven't watched them in years, and I actually was doing those videos in the same amount of time it took for each issue to come out. 27 issues came out, 26, 27 issues, whatever it was, came out over 10 years, so I would be right in line in about 3 years to finish it up, I was a teenager when more Swamp Thing came out. Brings back memories. Yeah, good stuff, man. What was was that a hardcover with just more Superman stories? Is that still in print? I don't know if it's still in print. It came out in 2020. It's, I'm sure it's out there. I'll show it to you. Yeah, this is all it is. The hardback Alan Moore stories, the deluxe edition. And there's a soft cover I had for years, but it didn't have the other two. It just had this main story in it. I got this because it had the complete Moore stuff. And I can go on with more. There's Supreme. If you're talking about Swamp Thing, there's an early issue of Swamp Thing around issue 23 or 24, where you see the Justice League on the satellite freaking out over what the Floronic Man is doing. And there's a few panels there where Superman is Superman by Alan Moore. Firestorm is talking about all the Floronic Man is making the plants overgrow themselves and increasing the oxygen level on planet Earth. And Superman looks at Firestorm as he's freaking out. And he's like, well, if you want to know how many oxygen atoms are on planet Earth, I can count them for you. And then after Floronic Man at the end of the story has gone nuts and Green Lantern and Superman are descending into the swamp on Earth, you hear the Floronic Man say they come from the skies. They always come from the skies. So there's a few little Alan Moore great Superman moments there in those earlier issues of Swamp Thing and stuff. You can always tell he has them. Okay. Getting through the comments. I'm so glad you guys are commenting. Thanks for everybody that's hanging in there. Like I said, we're doing a long one today. Lord Tateman's Comic Tims made interesting planetary Oh, thank you, Gore. Gore is being very complimentary of those videos. Thank you. Thank you, Gore. I need to get back to doing stuff like that. Let's see. Oh, hold on. It's Tat Man, not Tate. Sorry, man. Yeah, no, sorry, man. I'm a 51-year-old man. I'm doing what I can. As long as you know there's no disrespect, totally me. I have no problem owning it. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And again, sorry about the name thing. There is a couple guys on here I talked to over the years. It's like having kids. If I had 15 kids, I'd have to go through all 14 names before I got to the right one. People are way too uptight. I got the whole ridiculous changes being irritating, but everything else is a waste of time. Okay. I think we're talking about modern comics there. It's early Tim. Okay. Absolute Batman Year One is great because it gives you the original colors and new colors. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, Batman Year One. I was there when it came out and bought that book monthly. I like. I'm one of the few. I'm one. I know it's a Jim Gordon story and things like that, and maybe it's where I bought it off the newsstand, and it would be. I just found out a week ago that for years I thought I read Dark Knight Returns when I was 15 in 1988. But the collection that I have where I first really read it came out in 89, and that's blown my mind. I was reading Sandman before Dark Knight Returns. It completely messed me up. You know what I mean? If you knew the timeline in my head of how I thought I was on it with how I've read these things. So yeah, I bought Year One monthly off the racks, and I've probably read that more than I have read The Dark Knight Returns, which is still a lot. Something about that Batman Year One book. There's little things in there. When they're doing a stakeout, the lady that Jim Gordon's having the affair with, the cop, the detective, there's a scene where they're setting a stakeout in a trap for Batman, you know, and Batman is in an alley hiding behind a trash can, and he knows it's a stakeout, and they have the blonde girl walking down the street of Gotham at night. And I think they fake a mugging or something like that. Batman knows they're cops, but what is Batman saying as we're reading the exposition, his point of view dialogue? He knew she was a cop because she knows how to walk in high heels, and that's a lost art nowadays. Even at 13 or 14 years old, this is actually how I thought. I was so into older. I was into punk music, heavy metal, art, doing all the stuff, reading Mark Twain letters to the earth, things like that. I'm not saying I was definitely different from my town, but I was not unique probably to other places. You know what I mean? Just didn't know there was other people out there into this stuff, right? I was into this stuff, but I also knew that there was like a dignity of taking some time and learning to do classic things right. You know, it's probably from watching older movies and stuff, right? But there was nothing like seeing a bunch of adolescent girls trying to wear heels for the first time on a carpeted floor in a middle school, doing the duck walk with their freaking. If you see them from behind, they would have these flats that I called Minnie Mouse shoes because they had bows on them. And it killed me because as they came by looking all girl and graceful and you're that adolescent age where like they're pretty, but when they went by you and you saw them from behind, they had duck feet. You know, they walking, and I was just sort of like heel toe. You know, like, you know, nobody cares about this stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that I was weird. I was just really different about certain things. No biggie about the name. Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, I didn't think it'd be a big deal. I just figured, you know, a little respect is what I was giving. What we got here? Garth Ennis said that the first American superhero comic he read was Dark Knight. There's a cool thing. I have said it. If I ever had like a tagline to put out there, it would be, I wish I could go back and read Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen for the first time again. The thing about that being Garth Ennis's first book, which would bother me, and it probably didn't bother him, is that now I know that is such a high standard. One of the cool things about how I came into these classic books is, you know, I have to tell people, I said it last week again, before you read Watchmen, which came out in 86, get you a couple of books that came out in 83, 84, and 85, just 5 of them, and go back and read them, and then read one of those. That was the magic, is that I had so much behind me that was written differently, not as sophisticated, if you will, even though there's some fantastic stuff out there, obviously. But to have those 2 books take it to an actual, I don't know, more elevated art form. You got to be careful. You don't want to overhype this stuff, but they're fantastic. And sometimes the hype is from the passion, what you remember. So we're going to skip ahead here. I was going to show this last, but like I said, there's a video out there. I've never watched the video. I don't know if I did this book justice, but this is my favorite. Let's see if I can adjust this a little bit. I don't want to mess with things we've been doing so well. See if that's going to stay. We'll give this a shot. Maybe I won't hit the camera when I had these books, right? So in the early to mid 2000s, I know I was still married to my first wife, so this is before 2005 and 6. This 4-issue miniseries came out. by Kurt Busiek, Stuart Immonen. And I'd watched Stewart's, believe it or not, I actually watched Stewart's, I kept an eye on him, if you will. I wasn't seeking him out, but when I ran across his name, I made sure to pop out there and check out his stuff, because believe it or not, there was a thing called rock and roll comics that came out in the late 80s. They were unauthorized biographies, and I think they may have carried into the 90s. And one of the first one, if not the first issue that I grabbed, was the Guns N' Roses biography, because I was a Guns N' Roses nut. I still have an appreciation, but what's done is done. And to see him go from that little, say, indie book and stuff all the way up into making it to Superman and X-Men and everything that's cool, man. You know, I mean, I'm from the, I may have been a kid in the 70s and a different kind of kid in the 80s, two different childhoods, if you will. But the 80s to me was all about the underdog. You know what I mean? And Stewart, for some reason, I projected that on him. I know nothing about him. I know a little bit about his career, but what he published. For some reason, I felt like he was an underdog. I don't know. Anyway, and to see this come out. So the magic of this 4-issue miniseries is that Kurt Busiek took the concept of Superboy Prime that popped up in DC Comics Presents. Oh, I can't believe I'm blanking out on the number. Around the 80s, when Crisis was going on, we had a Superboy Prime get popped in there, right? The origin of Superboy Prime. And for you guys, Earth Prime in the DC universe is our Earth. This is where all the heroes and stuff are comic book characters, right? That's the idea of this. But he went even further with it, is that Superman is a character in here. And this is a kid whose parents, for some reason, they knew it was going to be considered a joke, but I think it had something to do with surnames of family members, becomes Clark Kent. And then all of a sudden he wakes up one day, and instead of like the Superboy of Earth Prime tied in with Halley's Comet, saying that's what activated his powers. So Halley's Comics, I don't think plays a part in this at all, but he just kind of wakes up and he has powers. But there's this real subtle thing that he did, is that everybody kept buying him stuff on his birthdays that was Superman related and kind of make lighthearted jokes and stuff, right? So the thing that got me about this is that he's the first hero of this planet, and he uses a few tricks he picked up on by reading those Superman comics about having a secret tunnel to get back home in, hidden under a tree trunk and stuff like that. He bases his comic on there, and we get real life ideas about this, right? And each issue takes place years apart. We see him as a college student getting these powers and stuff. We see him as a young man moving to the city, working for the New York Post, becoming a writer, much like Clark Kent, writing a book on the sides, becoming an author and stuff, and having life, and then having the government track him and stuff, and the government forcing him or wanting him to work with him, how he deals with it. Oh, here's the first issue. I have them out of order. So I absolutely love this, because this is written more like, even though it's panel to panel, it's still sequential art. This is Kurt Busiek being a writer. You know what I mean? Like a writer. This could have been, in my opinion, a novella. You know, it's just fantastic. And of course, it ends with 57 to about a 67-year-old man who he's starting to notice as he gets older, he's losing his powers. And then his children reveal they have powers. And then we get like this great, fantastic panel that I sort of compare to like the Legion of Superheroes, where it turns out a lot of people all of a sudden are getting powers. I mean, this is just a fantastic book. Here's our older Superman, you know, looking at his kids and children. I mean, some of the stuff is just breathtaking towards the end of his life, but it's the life of a man. The life of a man. Try to find that panel where he's flying with all the heroes. I mean, there's some beautiful art in this. So yeah, this is one of the books you take your time. I'm going to end up putting this to the side and reading it again also. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to find the panel where he is flying around with his all the people that have powers. Well, we're not going to find it, but like I said, this is some beautiful, beautiful art, man. You know, there's guys like Adam Hughes, Brian Hitch, and Stewart that I just love their style, and I can kind of put them in a category themselves and stuff, right? Photorealistic and beautiful. So this is my favorite Superman story ever, and it's because when his powers were developing, did they start taking the traits of Superman because he knew of Superman? Did Superman have an influence on sort of the evolution of how he interpreted what his powers were? And all of a sudden, like I said, he was just ahead of his time. You know, there's a lot of stuff in here that is symbolic of what Superman did in comics, and too, if you really read it, and just beautiful stuff and this world and stuff, how he ended up, like I said, if Superman was in the real world and we knew about Superman. This is my favorite Superman stuff, and I'm actually going to rebag these today. Those bags are probably 20 years old. So then we have this right here. Sometimes it's just for fun, you know what I mean? But all I'm going to say about this is that this is Roger Stern, who I consider one of the most underrated. There's certain writers that are just Roger Stern. We got some 90s Steve Rude, and even Al Milgrom got in there. You know what I mean? Al Milgrom is one of those guys that I respect, that he took what talent he had and went all the way with it. He's done everything in comics: editing, writing, drawing, inking. I'm sure he's done some lettering and coloring somewhere, right? And he went to high school with Jim Starlin, right? So anyway, yeah, I love this. Okay. All right. We're going to get through the stack here. Okay, look at this, guys. What is this? We're going back to the EC Comics days. All right. So this is a lot of the great Wally Wood stuff that he did back in the 50s with EC Comics and stuff, right? And one of the things that really rejuvenated comics, you understand, superheroes were dead after World War II. If you know your comic book history, and it's been talked to death by the comic book aficionados and stuff like that. But after World War II, the whole idea of the hero comics really started dying down. And we had Jack Kirby and Joe Simon end up inventing romance comics. Crime comics went up. And then we had the great EC. And EC came out with a horror magazine called Mad. Maybe in comic book first. I'm going really quick here on this history here, right? But as you can see here, for more than half a century, Mad has satirized politics, celebrity, pop culture, sports, and everything else in between. But for the first 23 issues, Mad existed as a comic book and spoofed each comic book and spoofed other comic books. And on that era came three legendary humorous illustrators: Jack Davis, Will Elder, and Wally Wood. And this is the Wally Wood special from those first 23 issues. I don't know. I think I have the Jack. Hopefully I've got the Jack Davis and the Will Elder upstairs. Each volume of Mad's Original Idiots looks back at those initial 23 issues and showcases the work of Mad's earliest and most influential artists. Now I'm going to go ahead and tell you, here's the other one. I definitely had the Will Elder. So hopefully I have the Jack Davis. But there's something in here that reunited, it ignited people who had grown up reading these comics to remember them. And it was Superman against Captain Marvels. Oh my goodness, I should have marked it. Oh, here it is. And I did not crack open my What the #1. I meant to grab that for that here. But Super Duper Man versus Captain Marvels by Wally Wood. And this is probably, the early 50s. I'm pretty sure Fawcett Comics had gone out of print because Superman, the Fawcett Comics, oh my goodness. I've been on here for going on almost 3 hours, guys, so bear with me here, right? But anyway, there was a lawsuit because Captain Marvel, Shazam, was outselling Superman, and they were saying he was derivative, and basically they just kind of gave up because they would not let go, Then all of a sudden, the EC Comics comes out, and I compare this to a Saturday Night Live skit from 1975, where you got to remember Star Trek was of the 60s and it was canceled for very stupid reasons. And Saturday Night Live comes on there, and they have John Belushi playing Captain Kirk, and they had the cast as Star Trek, and people are hitting that wave of nostalgia. And they're trying to say they're trying to find intelligent life out there. And then a movie exec driving a car through space ends up on the planet, and they reveal they canceled Star Trek, and he's like, we have failed. There is no intelligent life. So something about this story, and I'm going blank because it's 3 hours, almost 3 hours, guys, basically rejuvenated some people, probably with that Captain Marvel or something, but something about this story really boomed for Mad Magazine, at least with letters and stuff like that, right? So the comic book aficionados out there, feel free to let me know what you remember of this, because I'm completely blank. Now, the reason I was yelling about What the #1 is one of the things I was saying before about John Byrne returning to DC, we were getting hints that he was going back, was a What the comic had come up, and they were going back to not Brand Eck. This is the late 80s. It was a humor comic, and a lot of that humor is inspired by what they were doing with Mad Magazine and EC Comics and stuff, right? And John Byrne had done a Superb Man versus the Fantastic Four in it, you know. And if you read his Fantastic Four and you read his Superman, it was even funnier and stuff, right? So they did a satire of that, of Superman, on his two biggest books, you know, in my opinion. All right, one more time. Gorbanon, in the interview, Garth joked he thought all American comics were like that. He was soon disillusioned. Yes, yes. Let me give some people something to look at here while I get ready here. Oh, okay. Dark Knight and Watchmen changed my taste in comics. I was in high school, but I kept my comics a secret from friends. I don't know how long you've been watching, but I've told the story about how I got a hold of my Watchmen trade that I still have. You know, this older guy in a truck. Anyway, I had he wanted some comics that I had, and I was going to trade it to him. And he I have a video where I revisit where Howler Mouse bought his comics from 77 to whatever. I do have that's something like that is the title, where Little Howler Mouse bought his comics. That'll bring it up, but I'll show you the actual parking lot. But anyway, I went home, got some comics, put them under. For some reason, I put them under my flannel shirt that I had with my whatever concert t-shirt I had, and I walked to the parking lot, and it was like dusk, and this truck was parked under one of the lights, the parking lot lights, and it actually made a cone over him. And you would have thought it was a drug deal, because you know, he was like, "You got the books?" I'm like, "You got the trade?" You know, whatever I called it, "You got the Watchmen?" And I pulled the books out, gave it to him, and then got the trade, and then ran home. You would have thought too. That's all we said to each other. You would have thought we had done something more shady. Changed everything. I was that's one of the reasons it's blowing Rorschach. I'm not going to get into Watchmen talk. I will go. It'll be bad. I will be on here 3 more hours. Okay. I guess Dark Knight and Watchmen changed everyone's taste in comics. It definitely made its mark. So Kingdom Come, right? Kingdom Come is very interesting. I don't think I need to say a lot about this, other than I can't believe that we're closer to a 30-year anniversary than anything. I think this came out in 96. But this is secretly a Superman story. And the EC comic I just showed you, all the things that I'm showing you about Superman versus Captain Marvel, that influenced this story as well. Alex Ross came on. Kingdom Come is the story that this is Alex Ross's baby, and Mark Waid used to make that clear to people that this was Alex Ross's baby, of doing the future. Alex Ross had done Marvels with Kurt Busiek, where it was looking at the past, and he decided to do the future. I think this is supposed to be 25 years in the future. And it's generations, how heroes stop becoming more heroic with the next generation. And it was a statement about how violent and unheroic heroes were getting in the comics of the 90s, if you really wanted to get into that. And it's the return of Superman. It's secretly a Superman story. So Kingdom Come had come out. Mark Waid was brought on to kind of talk through the story and to put it together into something coherent with all of Alex Ross's ideas and things like that come out. And of course, it's an instant classic when it comes out, right? I have 2 sets of the actual 4-issue Prestige series. The great thing about getting the trade is that I think it was like 9 new pages. You get some new pages that were not in the series proper due to the length of the story. So when you actually bought the trade, you weren't wasting your money. Fantastic stuff in this. You know, there's tons of videos out there talking about Kingdom Come. There's nothing else I can really tell you, except it's full of Easter eggs, which makes it even more fun. Moving forward here, Jeff Loeb, Ed McGuinness, and Carlos Panchio, and everyone. But when World's Finest was a book that ran for a long time, that was basically Superman and Batman teaming up, Jeff Loeb came in and he did a series of stories, some that have been adapted to comics and stuff, They came out and did some very cool stories. Some were predictable, some were in continuity. It was another return of Supergirl, if you will, but a proper Kryptonian one, whatever. The first 12 issues have been made in Public Enemies and Supergirl The Return, whatever it was called. Those have both been made into straight to DVD cartoons, right? But then after that, you came out with this great story that I love, where basically I feel like Jeff Loeb had a field day. I think he went back to all the characters that he really liked. I think it's called Absolute Power. He found a way to do a story to where he could bring in all these great characters he liked as a kid by playing around with time. Because what he has done is that he had the Legion of super villains from the Legion of Superheroes of 1,000 Years in the Future went back in time, and they plucked Superman and Batman from exactly where they needed to after right when Batman's parents are killed and right when Superman lands. And they changed time and had these two take over the world with them acting as parents. And we get little winks and nods to the super liberal Green Arrow here, showing there's a resistance on Earth, sort of like he did in Dark Knight Returns. With the kryptonite arrows not being a big deal, but they're so close, they're like brothers. If you mess with Superman, Batman will kill you for messing with his brother. And they show how vicious they are. And we get to see these characters. As a Legion fan, I was geeking out. So things happened where we get like the real Spirit of America, a version of Wonder Woman, and of course Uncle Sam come in. And they start things to where we try to get out of this. And with his great willpower, he's got a Green Lantern ring. But this is what I'm saying. If you were into comics, there's so many Easter eggs and history pulled into this. Deadman and guest stars and Freedom Fighters and Justice League characters, Legion of Superhero characters. This great stuff. But when did this really do me justice? It's when we had a cover with Jonah Hex in it. Anyway, we had a cover with Kamandi as they're kind of time traveling. Kamandi has caged up Batman and Superman, like the animals have caged him up many times. And what do we get? We even have Jonah Hex in here. So this is just a little storyline here of a lot of an excuse where Jeff Loeb sort of plays with time travel to where it doesn't really give you too bad of a headache. And it's an excuse to have all these characters show up. And it's pure fun with great art. And that's what I mean. Sometimes it just needs to be about fun. So that's probably like Superman and Batman, something probably like 13 to 17 or something. Who knows? Moving on. If you like Steve Gerber, we're going to keep going here pretty quick. But around the time that I was reading that Spider-Man, Superman Treasury Edition I was showing you, these comics were in there. This was Gene Colan, Rick Veitch, Steve Gerber, and this is bound to be 81 or 82. But we get this really weird Phantom Zone number 1 through 4, and DC Comics Presents 97, 1982 and 86, respectively. The last chapter of this book came out 4 years later as sort of a sequel with the last issue of DC Comics Presents, right? But I had never seen these characters drawn this way, and Steve Gerber draws mind trips more than anything, right? So we have some old burnt-out hippie running around, and I'm not real sure what to tell you, man, but like Superman gets trapped in the Phantom Zone. The Phantom Zone villains are taken over. They found some way to escape the Phantom Zone, but we get the idea that Steve Gerber is doing some stuff that is kind of hard for me to explain in such a short amount of time. Otherwise, if you like Steve Gerber, this is Steve Gerber doing some stuff at DC with these characters. The only way Steve Gerber can do it. It involves Phantom Zones, an old burnout hippie that's not sure he knows what he's seeing, in the Justice League helping out Superman fight the Phantom Zone villains that come from Krypton to try to take them down, right? Horrible review on my part of that, but hey, it's Steve Gerber. You either know how hard that is or you don't. We're having Comic Can issues. So after John Byrne leaves the Superman books and he's killed some Kryptonians, there was this storyline that came out that ran through all the titles with Dan Jurgens, Jerry Ordway, George Perez, and Roger Stern writing. And the way I understand it, Byrne kind of helped plot some of this out because they knew he was leaving, to where it was going with. And we had these fantastic pencilers of Kerry Gamble, Dan Jurgens, Mike Mignola, Jerry Ordway, George Perez, and Kurt Swan. Now, yes, I'm a DC guy. Yes, I know there are Marvel people out there and stuff, but this was just geeking me out. You know what I mean? I'm like, this is great. Kerry Gamble, Tom Rainey. I actually told Tom Rainey I kind of put him in the category with Kerry Gamble, and I had to watch what I was saying and slow down because I think they are fantastic artists that I don't understand why they aren't more popular. I don't know, right? And all this stuff. But basically, Superman takes off into space because he's having all this guilt of how Superman shouldn't kill, and he killed people. So he has real ramifications on his actions, what's going on, to where he realized he was becoming delusional, getting, I'm trying to think what the word I'm looking for here is, but basically he took on a persona that he didn't realize he was doing at night, where he was gangbuster going on the street level crime. Gangbuster had already been established as somebody else. So his guilt and the ghost that he was seeing that may or may not be real, the Kryptonians, really was affecting him. So he exiles himself in space. And we see what's going on in space with him and all the planets and all the aliens that he meets. Meanwhile, we're also seeing what's going back on Krypton. Now, this is more traditional comic book storytelling. This is not the Alan Moore stuff and everything, right? But it was a little bit unpredictable. You did not know where this was going, what was going to happen. And it's, you finally get to see some sci-fi stuff in space. This is my bookmark. So as you can see, it's been since about August. It's probably been since about September or October since I read this again. And this is where I stopped, But yeah, it's full of aliens. It's full of Superman figuring out stuff, introspective, apparitions, ghost stories where he sees things that aren't there. They sneak in the Thing arm with a lot of this stuff. But it goes all over the place. And I'm not saying it's the most coherent thing ever. But we end up back on War World, where he becomes the gladiator I was talking about. And then we get to this leads up to a lot of things that's coming with a lot of great art. So there you go. Yeah, we lead up to, here's some George Perez taking it over when he returns to the Earth. Yeah, I forgot about the actual. Yeah, these two were my favorite, some of my favorite covers at the time. Just solid action there. Jerry Ordway does no wrong. Everything has weight that he does. Yeah, the Gladiator issue. And of course, like I said, when he's being bombarded by apparitions and aliens, we got the Thing arm snuck in there, which I thought was very cool. But yeah, great stuff of the late 80s. That's coming in. And then we go to the early 90s, and I have these issues, still have the issues I bought. I want to say this was like 93, but we have Panic in the Sky. 1992, my friends. And for some reason, my memory may be a little bit blank or something like that, because I used to party a lot. We'll put it that way. And get, party a lot and stuff. But it seems like I remember reading some of this when I was watching the Freddie Mercury tribute concert at my grandmother's, in the midst of my travels. And I think this is when I was working at a comic book shop. But all of a sudden, you had we're in the triangle era of Superman, where you're supposed to follow the books and look at the triangle for the numbering to the actual books for that year. And all of a sudden, they came up with this fantastic story that could have been a crossover. In the eras of crossovers, of Invasion, Crisis on Infinite Earths, more like Massacres, all the X-Men follow the mutant stuff. We get a book that stays in the Superman books, where it is Brainiac doing an all-out attack, and Superman calls upon all his friends. And the storyline is called Panic in the Sky. And he just gets bigger and bigger, to where we get new gods coming out here. They pull in everything and everybody. I'm trying to find a 2-page splash, but we end up getting the Justice League, the new gods. Here we go. We end up getting all these heroes to come in to help against this. And this is all in the Superman books, instead of making this some huge crossover event of the year, if you will. And this thing is just fantastic. I was like, out of nowhere. The story just keeps going. We get Deathstroke in there. The continuity between issues is fantastic. Louise Simonson is there. Uh, this thing just gets better and better. And if you're a fan of the Justice League cartoons of the Denny universe that we were talking about and things like that, they actually gave you a hint that as things ended, everybody thought that the return of Darkseid was going to be the big reveal. And then it turns out it was all about Brainiac. And they actually had an episode called Panic at the Sky to give you a wink and a nod of what was going on as they went through a whole season of bringing this big villain about. I think they thought they were going to end the season or something like that. But anyway, Darkseid ended up returning. Brainiac was in there, and they named one of them Panic of the Sky. This had an influence on it, right? We're about done, guys. I've had a blast doing this as we go through here. Thanks for the people that have hung out this whole time. I mean, we have gone a long time. All right. And I think we're at the last two sets here, right? But some people have been talking about Jeff Johns and stuff, the Legion of Superheroes. But what a lot of people don't know is that throughout the mid to late 2000s, leading up to Final Crisis, there was a 3-part story arcs that was going on that Jeff Johns was doing, and he started with Brad Meltzer with the Lightning Saga. And basically what happened with this is that there was a character they were going to bring back. Everybody thought it was going to be Impulse, I think, or something. Anyway, some character had died, maybe Superboy or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, but basically what was going on is that we were starting to get hints of the Legion of Superheroes proper returning, the original, the one from the 50s to all the way up to Zero Hour. They were coming back, and they were referencing the lightning rods, that if you're a fan of the Legion of Superheroes, you know that Lightning Lad died, and they found that this technology where you would hold this wand, and they were on a planet, an asteroid, where he was buried, or not buried, but he's in a glass coffin, that when you held it up, when lightning struck it, your life force would leave you and bring them back to life, right? So the Lightning Saga had started, and this takes place like in modern times, and you slowly start realizing that they're bringing back the original Legion of Superheroes. They pop in. A couple years later, in Action Comics, Jeff Johns is writing that, and we get them back properly here, right? By Gary Frank, they're bringing back the actual Legion of Superheroes. We're back in that future world, and xenophobia has taken over, where we have Earthman. The Legion of Supervillains, as they were, are practically loved by Earth because it's all about having Earth be for Earthers. No more aliens on there and stuff, right? So they brought back all these covers, alternate covers, by bringing back great artists of the Legion of the past, like Mike Grell and all this stuff. And we're reintroduced to the Legion returning proper, and they even bring in the Legion of Substitute Heroes. Doing their awkward missions with nothing, being innovative and stuff, right? And all of this was actually leading up to the Final Crisis, where we have the Legion of Three Worlds, which is probably the last greatest thing that George Perez had done, because we came out with this 5-issue miniseries where every version of Superboy Prime returns in 1,000 years in the future. And due to the multiverse, if you will, we get all three versions of the Legion of Superheroes joining together to fight Superboy Prime and his Legion of Supervillains and all sorts of things that are going on. And this will make you a Polar Boy fan. Do you hear me? Anybody that has never ever heard of the Legion of superheroes or ever read them, this is the book. All right. And then right here, I am tired. I'm not going to get deep into it, right? But we're with Jeff Loeb again, right? This book is loved. This was a mini series that came out, but this is a Superman for all seasons. And this is when Superman is sort of becoming a man and figuring out what it means to be Superman. It's very nostalgic. And with that, this is when Jim Sale and Jeff Loeb were hot. They were doing things like Daredevil Yellow, Superman Blue, and then over here at DC, we're getting things like Superman for all seasons that they were doing in Kansas. Kind of like his transition from Kansas to Metropolis as he's figuring things out and talking to his friends. A coming of age story, if you will. But yeah, this is actually beloved and stuff. Now, it does not blow me away like it has other people, but what are you going to do, right? A lot of people love it. I think it's a solid story, and it's about it. Phew. All right, guys. Look at that. I have not stayed online this long in forever. So let's see what we had there. Got some comments. We'll just start here. Dark Knight and Watchmen changed my taste in comics. I was in high school, but I kept comics a secret from my friends. I've got stories I've told over the years about stuff like that. Going forward, anyone who asks about where to begin with Superman, I'm recommending this live stream. Excellent recommendations. Well, thank you, sir. And this is just what I picked. I'm not joking. I picked this stuff about 20 minutes before I went on air, just walking around my boxes and my shelves. This is the stuff that came first to my head, the first things that came to my head. Tomorrow, I could add 10 more books. There's so much stuff on Superman out there. All right, what do we got here? We have Michael. Good afternoon. Great to see you. Well, guys, this ended up being a 3-hour and 9-minute live stream as I'm speaking. Many of you actually stuck through this thing, so I appreciate that. And I had a blast. It flew by. I cannot believe that we are at 12:20 in the afternoon. So there is so much great stuff. So don't ever let anybody tell you there's nothing that can be done with Superman. Don't ever let anybody tell you there's something wrong with being a Boy Scout. There's room for that in this world. And even if you don't like Superman, there is a story out there that I think you will like. So happy birthday to Superman. Thank you, Superman, for starting all this. And man, just read your comics, man. Take a chance. The great thing about this is that there's so many things out there with Superman. A lot of it is super cheap. Which is the thing with me. I mean, I love this hobby, but as you can see, probably about 90% of everything in this room is secondhand over the years. You know what I mean? There's no use in going broke and stuff. Have an adventure with it, have a good time. And if you're not into if you're not into going out and doing the digging and stuff, a lot of this stuff is probably on Amazon and eBay and stuff, right? So just have fun with it. I got a lot of this stuff at secondhand stores like Ollie's and stuff, which I could not believe, and I still have a lot of these original issues. So I have a lot of stuff to put up. Thanks for joining me this morning. Happy birthday, Superman. And just to kind of throw it out there, I'm thinking about doing a stream where I dig through my DVDs. And if I have any, I sold my VHS collection for $500 last year. So I still have a handful of VHSs that I have just for decoration, I guess, and to hold on to. But anyway, my whole point is I keep having this thing in my head about 1982 being probably one of the greatest years in movies ever for everything that came out. And it blew my mind how a lot of that stuff flopped, but they're legendary. So I'm actually thinking about maybe doing some kind of little stream or something to where I just get my collection of DVDs of movies from 1982 and talk about them, right? I mean, we're talking John Carpenter's The Thing. We're talking Blade Runner, Dark Crystal, Tron, E.T., many things. In my mind, to me, a lot of the decades have their own identity. That's why we call them the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. But in my mind, from 1978 to 1982, that's a special little era, era of its own. So that might be what's up for the future. So guys, we're going to look at these last comments and we'll get out of here. I think everybody is saying goodbye. Back when, there's a bunch of them. Wouldn't you know it? And thank you for all the kind words, everybody out there. Everybody's saying goodbye. What we got here? Eric Breen. Any 1982 conversation needs to include Diner. Breen, you're welcome to pop on that one. If we do that one, you message me. I think it's on X/Twitter. If you want to do that, we'll work it out and do that one together, because believe it or not, I have seen Diner one time, probably 89, 90. I barely remember it. I'm going to have to look at the trailer. So I am all down for that. Look at this. Yeah, Diner is a good film. I'm going to have to rewatch. I'm going to have to do homework. It looks like. Later, dudes. Thanks for joining us. Everybody, Be excellent to each other. Read your comics, guys. Later. Eric Breen is in. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Yeah, Breen, please message me on X, man. I'll get back to you. I promise. Later, guys. We said goodbye 5 times.